The empty swing set. Liam moved to the quiet suburban neighborhood for precisely that, the quiet. After years in a cramped city apartment, the house with its small, neat backyard felt like a sanctuary. The only slightly odd feature was the old, slightly rusted swing set left behind by the previous owners, standing solitary in the middle of the lawn. It had two simple swings with faded plastic seats. Liam didn't have children and had vague plans to eventually remove it, but for the first few weeks, he barely gave it a second thought. The neighborhood was peaceful, almost unnaturally so. Houses were spaced comfortably apart, lawns were well maintained, and the evenings were usually filled only with the sound of crickets or a distant lawnmower. Liam settled into a routine: work, home, dinner, maybe a walk around the block as dusk settled. It was during one of these evening walks, about a month after moving in, that he first noticed it. As he approached his house, bathed in the warm glow of the porch light, he saw one of the swings on the swing set moving. It wasn't a wild, frantic swing, but a slow, gentle, rhythmic back-and-forth motion, as if someone had just gotten off it. He stopped at the edge of his driveway, puzzled. There was absolutely no wind. The leaves on the nearby trees were perfectly still, the air heavy and calm. He scanned the yard and the street. Empty. No children running off, no stray animals. Just the lone swing, swaying softly in the twilight. Must be momentum, he thought, trying to rationalize. Maybe a bird landed on it earlier, or the ground settled. He watched for another minute. The swing continued its gentle arc, gradually slowing, but taking an unnaturally long time to come to a complete stop. Shaking his head, feeling a prickle of unease he couldn't explain, he went inside, locking the door firmly behind him. A few nights later, it happened again. He was washing dishes, glancing out the kitchen window that overlooked the backyard. The swing set was bathed in moonlight. And there it was, the same swing, the one on the right, moving back and forth with that same lazy, consistent rhythm. Again, the air was perfectly still. This time, the unease was stronger, coiling in his stomach. He dried his hands slowly, his gaze fixed on the swaying swing. It felt deliberate. Watched. He forced himself to look away, telling himself it was an optical illusion, a trick of the light and shadows. But the image stayed burned in his mind. He started paying closer attention to the swing set. During the day, it sat inert and unremarkable. But almost every other night, usually sometime after dusk had fully settled, he would catch the right-hand swing moving. Never both swings, always just the one. Always that same gentle, almost melancholic sway. He tried testing it. On a windless afternoon, he pushed the swing himself, watching how long it took to stop. It lost momentum much faster than the phantom swing he witnessed at night. He checked the swing's chains and hinges. They were old, slightly stiff, nothing that would explain prolonged, unassisted movement. He even considered seismic activity, but there were never any tremors reported. The phenomenon began to gnaw at him. Sleep became difficult. He found himself drawn to the window repeatedly throughout the evening, checking. Seeing the swing still was almost as unnerving as seeing it move, filling him with a tense anticipation. When it was moving, a cold dread would creep up his spine. It wasn't frightening in a jump-scare way, it was the quiet insistence, the inexplicable nature of it, that was deeply unsettling. It felt like a quiet message he couldn't decipher, a presence making itself known in the most subtle, unnerving way possible. He mentioned it cautiously to his neighbor, Mr. Henderson, an elderly man who had lived on the street for decades. "Ever notice anything odd about the swing set at my place?" Liam asked, trying to sound casual. Mr. Henderson paused his gardening, his expression clouding over slightly. "That old thing. The Millers left it, didn't they?" He squinted towards Liam's yard. "Can't say I have." "Why? Giving you trouble?" "No, not trouble," Liam said quickly. "Just, sometimes I think I see one of the swings moving on its own at night. When there's no wind." The old man's gaze lingered on the swing set for a long moment. He didn't scoff or rationalize. He just nodded slowly. "Some things are best left alone, son," he said quietly, before turning back to his roses, a clear signal the conversation was over. His cryptic response did nothing to ease Liam's anxiety, it amplified it. Liam started avoiding the backyard after dark. He kept the blinds on the kitchen window closed. But he couldn't completely shut it out. Sometimes, late at night, he would hear it, the faintest creak, creak of the swing's chain, carrying through the silent house. Each soft sound sent a jolt through him, making his heart pound and his skin prickle. One night, driven by a desperate need for an answer, any answer, he decided to set up his phone on a tripod inside, recording the backyard through the kitchen window. He positioned it carefully, hit record, and tried to distract himself in the living room, though his ears strained for any sound. Around 11 p.m., he heard it, the faint, rhythmic creaking. He waited, heart hammering, for an hour before retrieving his phone. He sat down, hands clammy, and played back the video. The footage was dark, illuminated only by the faint moonlight. For the first hour, the swing set was perfectly still. Then, precisely at the time he'd heard the creaking start, the right-hand swing began to move. It started with a tiny nudge, then gained momentum, settling into that familiar, gentle back-and-forth sway. There was nothing visible causing it. No wind rustled the leaves, no animal darted past, no strings or wires were apparent. It just moved. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the swing continued its silent dance for the entire duration of the recording. The most chilling part? As he zoomed in, enhancing the grainy footage as much as possible, he could almost make out a faint indentation on the plastic seat as it moved forward, as if under the weight of something unseen, something incredibly light. Liam felt a profound, soul-deep chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He deleted the recording immediately, a frantic reaction. Seeing the proof was somehow worse than just suspecting. He knew he couldn't live like this. The constant low-level dread, the feeling of being observed by something tied to that swing set, was eroding his peace. The next morning, armed with a wrench set and a heavy dose of nervous energy, he went out to the backyard. He started with the bolts holding the right-hand swing. They were rusted tight. As he strained, applying pressure, he heard a sound that wasn't metal scraping. It was a sigh. Soft, ethereal, seemingly coming from the air right beside him. Liam froze, wrench slipping from his suddenly numb fingers. He whipped his head around. Nothing. Just the quiet yard, the morning sun casting long shadows. But the air felt suddenly colder, charged with static. He backed away slowly from the swing set, his heart pounding erratically. He didn't try to dismantle it again. He lives with it now. He keeps the backyard blinds closed at night. He avoids looking out after dark. Sometimes, when the house is utterly silent, he still hears the faint creak. He never investigates. He tells himself it's the house settling, the wind he can't feel, anything but the truth his gut screams at him. The empty swing continues its gentle, nightly rhythm in his backyard, a quiet testament to something unseen, unknown, and inexplicably present. It's a constant, silent reminder that even in the most peaceful places, some things are moving when nothing should be, watched by eyes you cannot see, forever swaying just beyond the edge of understanding. And sometimes, the quietest horrors are the ones that linger the longest. Title: The Follow Request. It arrived like dozens of others, a notification bubble on Clara's phone screen, overlaying the photo feed she was idly scrolling through. User 0816 wants to follow you. Clara tapped on it, expecting the usual bot account or maybe someone she vaguely knew from college. But the profile was blank. Utterly blank. No profile picture, just the default gray silhouette. 0 posts. 0 followers. Following 0. The username itself, user 0816, seemed impersonal, machine-generated. Weird spam, she thought, hitting decline without a second thought and returning to her feed. She forgot about it almost instantly. Until the next day. User 0816 wants to follow you. The same blank profile. The same nonsensical username. Annoyed, Clara hit decline again, a little more forcefully this time. Maybe it was a glitch in the app. That evening, while waiting for her takeout order, she posted a quick photo of the sunset painting the city skyline. Within seconds, a notification pinged. User 0816 liked your photo. Clara froze. How? She hadn't accepted the follow. Her profile was set to private. Only her approved followers should be able to see or interact with her posts. She quickly checked her follower list. User 0816 wasn't there. She checked her blocked list, empty. She checked the post's privacy settings, definitely private. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. She refreshed the app, thinking it must be a caching error. The like remained. Heart pounding a little faster, she went back to the user 0816 profile. Still blank. Still zero everything. She hit block this time, feeling a strange sense of violation. For a few days, nothing happened. Clara started to relax, convincing herself it had been a particularly persistent and bizarre bug. She posted a few more pictures, a funny picture of her cat, a meal she cooked, a selfie with a friend. Then, late one night, as she was getting ready for bed, her phone lit up with a rapid succession of notifications. Ping. 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 User 0817 liked your photo. 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 A new username, just one digit off. Another completely blank profile. But it wasn't liking her recent posts. It was liking photos from years ago. A picture from her graduation. A blurry photo from a beach trip in 2018. A photo of a pet hamster she'd had as a teenager, posted ages ago as a hashtag Throwback Thursday. Photos buried so deep in her feed she barely remembered posting them herself. How could it find those specific ones? How did it even see them if her profile was private? A cold dread washed over her. This wasn't random. This felt targeted. Personal. The selection of photos felt intimate, like browsing through a personal photo album, not a social media feed. She blocked user 0817 immediately, her hands shaking. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of her apartment building, every distant siren, sounded amplified, menacing. She kept imagining the blank silhouette from the profile, a faceless observer scrolling through her life. The next day, she told her friend Maya about it over coffee. Maya was practical. It's gotta be a stalker bot, Clara. Or someone you know messing with you using fake accounts. Just keep blocking them. Report them. Clara tried. She reported user 0816 and user 0817. She tightened her privacy settings even further, though they were already maxed out. But the feeling of being watched persisted. She found herself glancing over her shoulder more often, feeling a prickle on the back of her neck when she was alone. Then came user 0818. This time, it didn't just like old photos. It started leaving comments. Single-word comments on specific, older pictures. On the photo of her teenage hamster, soft. On the beach trip photo, cold. On a picture of her smiling awkwardly at her first office job, nervous. The comments were deleted almost as soon as they appeared, leaving only the notification preview on her lock screen and the chilling echo in her mind. They were accurate observations, capturing a feeling or texture associated with the memory. It felt like someone wasn't just seeing the photos, but remembering the moment with her. Or, impossibly, experiencing it through the image. Panic began to set in. Clara considered deleting her account altogether, erasing years of memories shared with friends. But part of her resisted. Why should she be driven offline by this thing? One evening, she decided to test it. She was home alone, the city lights twinkling outside her window. With trembling fingers, she took a picture of the mundane, the half-read book on her nightstand. She uploaded it, her heart pounding. Instantly, ping. User 0819, liked your photo. Another blank account, the number increment again. Clara stared at the notification, feeling sick. Then, another notification arrived immediately after. User 0819, wants to send you a message. Her breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at her to ignore it, to block this new iteration instantly. But a morbid, terrifying curiosity gripped her. What could it possibly say? Her thumb hovered over the notification. Taking a shaky breath, she tapped it, opening the message request screen. The message contained only 3 words. Look behind you. Clara screamed, dropping her phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. She scrambled backwards off her couch, eyes darting wildly around her small, familiar living room. The curtains were drawn. The door was locked. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. Yet the presence felt overwhelming, suffocating, as if the sender wasn't just looking at her photo, but was in the room with her, watching her reaction. She never found out who, or what, user 0816 through 0819 was. She deleted the app that night, then factory reset her phone, then changed all her passwords for everything else. She lives with a constant low hum of anxiety now. Every notification sound makes her jump. Every default gray silhouette avatar she sees online sends a jolt of fear through her. Sometimes, she wonders if it's still out there, incrementing its number, waiting. She tells herself it was just a sophisticated hack, a terrifying prank. But deep down, she can't shake the feeling that something faceless and unknown saw her, knew her, through the curated squares of her digital life, and could reach out from the blank void of the internet with a knowledge that defied explanation. How private is private? Who is looking at your old photos right now? And what happens when the blank profiles decide to send you a message? The night listener. The old radio wasn't supposed to work. Found buried in a box of forgotten junk in his late grandfather's attic, it was a heavy, wood-paneled relic from decades past, its power cord frayed, its tuning dial stiff. Mark had brought it home mostly for nostalgic decoration, placing it on a bookshelf in his quiet study. He never bothered plugging it in. That's why the sound, when it first started, was so profoundly disturbing. It was well past midnight. Mark was working late, the only light coming from his desk lamp, the rest of the house swallowed by silence. He was just about to call it a night when he heard it, a faint crackle, like static electricity, coming from the direction of the bookshelf. He froze, listening intently. The crackle sharpened, resolving into the unmistakable sound of radio static, interspersed with faint, ghostly snippets of what sounded like old-timey music, a tinny piano melody that faded in and out. His heart began to pound. He slowly turned his chair towards the bookshelf. The radio sat there, dark and inert, exactly as he'd left it. It wasn't plugged in. He knew this for a fact. He hadn't even checked if the ancient plug would fit a modern outlet. The static and faint music continued for another minute, seeming to emanate directly from the wooden casing, before abruptly cutting out, plunging the room back into heavy silence. Mark sat there for a long time, goosebumps prickling his arms, his mind racing. Impossible. Had he imagined it? Was it picking up some stray signal interference? But how, without power? He tried to dismiss it as a freak occurrence, maybe some weird atmospheric condition interacting with the old components. He went to bed, but sleep was restless, filled with fragmented dreams of crackling static. A few nights later, it happened again. Around the same late hour, the static returned, louder this time. It wasn't just music fragments now, woven within the hiss and pop were faint voices. Not clear speech, more like distant, overlapping whispers, impossible to decipher. They sounded old, their cadence strange and rhythmic. Mark felt a cold dread seep into him. He approached the radio cautiously, leaning close. The static seemed to intensify as he neared, the whispers swirling just beneath the surface noise. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the cool wood of the casing. The sound didn't change. He tapped the silent tuning dial. Nothing. Still unplugged, still inexplicably broadcasting its phantom signals. He started leaving the study door closed at night, trying to put distance between himself and the unsettling object. But the sound seemed to find him. Sometimes, lying in bed, he would hear the faintest crackle drifting down the hallway, accompanied by those indecipherable, murmuring voices. It was never loud enough to be certain, always just faint enough to make him question his own hearing, his own sanity. He considered throwing the radio away, but a strange reluctance held him back. It was his grandfather's, a piece of family history. And a morbid curiosity was growing. What was it picking up? Where were these sounds coming from? One Saturday night, unable to bear the suspense, he decided to actively listen. He sat in the study after midnight, the room dark except for the moonlight filtering through the window, his gaze fixed on the silent radio. He waited. The minutes ticked by in agonizing silence. Just as he was about to give up, thinking perhaps his attention had somehow broken the spell, the static crackled to life. It was clearer tonight, the whispers more defined, though still nonsensical, like listening to a crowd talk underwater. Beneath the voices, a new sound emerged, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 tap. Mark leaned forward, straining to hear. The tapping seemed to keep time with the whispers. Was it Morse code? Some kind of signal? His mind grasped for logical explanations, loose wires vibrating, thermal expansion, but none fit the rhythmic, intentional pattern. Then, something shifted. The whispers coalesced for a brief moment, and Mark heard, with chilling clarity, a single word rise above the static, listening. He recoiled as if struck. The air in the room felt suddenly icy. The single word hung in the silence that followed the static abruptly cutting out again. He was drenched in cold sweat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It wasn't just random noise. Something was aware. Something knew he was there. He couldn't stay in the house that night. He grabbed his keys and drove, ending up parked by a deserted lakefront, watching the water ripple under the moon until dawn, the word listening echoing in his head. He returned home exhausted but resolute. The radio had to go. He wouldn't smash it, but he couldn't keep it in the house. He wrapped it carefully in an old blanket, carried it out to his car trunk, and drove it to an electronics recycling center miles away, dropping it into a large bin filled with defunct monitors and printers. He felt a wave of relief wash over him as he drove away, as if shedding a heavy weight. That night, his house was blissfully silent. No static, no whispers, no tapping. He slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The following evening, he settled onto his couch to watch a movie. Halfway through, his phone, resting on the coffee table, buzzed. He glanced at it, an unknown number. He usually ignored those, but something made him pick up. He said hello. There was no response, only a sound that made his blood run cold. Faint, unmistakable radio static crackled through the phone speaker. And beneath it, quiet but clear, the rhythmic sound of tapping. Tap, 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 tap. He slammed the phone down, his hand shaking violently. He blocked the number, but the damage was done. The silence of his house no longer felt peaceful, it felt watchful, waiting. He doesn't know how it found his number. He doesn't know if getting rid of the radio did any good at all, or if the connection was ever truly with the object itself. Now, sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, he thinks he hears it, the faintest crackle in the air, the barest whisper just at the edge of hearing. He checks his phone compulsively. He avoids silence, always leaving a TV or music playing softly. Because the radio might be gone, but the chilling fear remains, something was listening then. And maybe, somehow, it's still listening now. The unread notification. It began the way most digital annoyances do, small, easily ignored, probably just a glitch. For Anna, whose phone was usually a meticulously managed hub of cleared alerts, the persistent red badge showing a single unread notification was jarring. It wasn't tied to any specific app icon. Not mail, not messages, not social media. Just the general settings icon, or sometimes, even more unsettlingly, hovering near the very top status bar, implying a system-level alert she couldn't access. It showed a bold, stark 1. At first, she cycled through the usual fixes. Restarted the phone. Checked every single app folder for lurking unread items. Cleared caches. Updated the operating system. Nothing worked. The Phantom 1 remained, a tiny crimson beacon of digital disorder. Weird bug, she muttered, trying to push it to the back of her mind. Probably fix itself in the next patch. But it didn't fix itself. Days turned into a week, and the 1 was a constant presence on her screen. It sounds trivial, she knew, but for someone who prided herself on digital tidiness, who found a sliver of control in achieving inbox zero and clearing all badges, it was like a tiny, persistent itch under the skin. Then, the feeling started. A subtle, creeping sense that the notification wasn't just a bug. It felt intentional. Aware. Sometimes, when she'd pick up her phone after leaving it untouched for a while, she'd feel a phantom vibration just before the screen lit up, as if the phone itself was anticipating her touch, reminding her of that single, unread item. She started researching online, searching forums for persistent notification badge, ghost notification won't clear. She found plenty of threads about common app glitches, but nothing quite matched her situation, a system-level badge with no source, resistant to all troubleshooting. A few users mentioned similar brief occurrences after major updates, but there's always resolved. Hers didn't. One night, working late at her desk, the house quiet around her, she glanced at her phone lying face down beside her keyboard. It was completely silent, screen dark. Yet, she felt it again, that distinct, brief vibration. Not a buzz signaling a call or text, just a faint, internal shudder from the device. Hesitantly, she reached over and picked it up. The screen remained dark, but as her eyes adjusted, she thought she saw it. The faint outline where the red 1 usually sat seemed almost imperceptibly brighter than the surrounding black glass, like a tiny ember glowing in the dark. Her breath caught. She snatched her hand back as if burned. Impossible. Screens don't glow when they're off. She blinked, looked again. The effect was gone. Just a dark, inert slab of glass and metal. Had she imagined it? Was the stress finally getting to her? The feeling of being watched intensified, but it wasn't the typical paranoia of cameras or hackers. It felt like the phone itself was the observer, its single unread notification a symbolic at, constantly open, constantly registering, something. Her. She tried disabling all notification badges through the system settings. The red 1 visually disappeared from the icons, but Anna knew it was still there, conceptually. The system still registered one pending alert it couldn't account for. Hiding it didn't erase the knowledge. It felt like closing your eyes and pretending the thing standing in the corner wasn't there. The phantom vibrations became more frequent, often happening when she was talking about the phone issue or even just thinking about it intensely. It was as if the device, or whatever the 1 represented, was responding to her anxiety. Desperate, she took it to a tech repair shop. The technician ran diagnostics, checked the software, even did a partial hardware inspection. Honestly, he said, handing it back with a shrug, hardware's fine, software seems clean. Never seen a badge stick like that without a source app. Could be a really deep kernel bug, but that's rare. Maybe try a full factory reset. Anna backed up her essential data, took a deep breath, and performed the factory reset, wiping the phone clean. She meticulously set it up again, logging into her accounts, reinstalling only essential apps. For a few glorious hours, the screen was clean, the badges all blessedly zero. Relief washed over her. It was just a stubborn bug. That evening, she restored her contacts from her cloud backup. The moment the sync completed, the tiny red 1 reappeared on the settings icon. A cold dread unlike anything she'd felt before clamped down on her. It wasn't the phone's software. It wasn't a glitch confined to the device. It was tied to her account, her digital existence. Something had attached itself to her profile in the cloud, manifesting as this single, silent, unreadable notification. What did it want her to read? What message, what alert, what piece of information was trapped behind that impervious number? She considered getting a new phone number, abandoning her long-held cloud accounts, essentially digitally disappearing. But the thought felt extreme, paranoid. And a chilling question lingered, would it even work? Or would the 1 simply follow her digital footprint, reattaching itself as soon as she re-entered the connected world? Now, Anna lives with the 1. She tries to ignore it. She arranges her apps so the affected icon is buried in a folder she never opens. But she knows it's there. Every time she unlocks her phone, a part of her braces for it. Sometimes, late at night, she still feels those phantom vibrations, a silent reminder from her pocket or nightstand. She finds herself looking at strangers' phones, noticing their notification badges. Most are cluttered, ignored. But sometimes she sees a phone with just one single, red notification badge lit up. And she wonders. Is theirs a real message? Or is it like hers? A silent, persistent signal from somewhere unknown, representing something unseen, unread, and utterly inescapable. A message that's always there, forever waiting to be acknowledged. The pattern in the static. Eliza didn't mind the old television that came with her rented apartment. It was a bulky, pre-smart TV model, but it worked well enough for the occasional movie night. Mostly, it sat silent in the corner of her living room, a dark, reflective square. Until the static started. It wasn't constant. It began as brief flickers, usually when she first turned the TV on or off, or sometimes momentarily when switching inputs. Just a split-second burst of black and white snow before the picture stabilized or the screen went fully dark. Standard behavior for older tech, she assumed. The first time she noticed the pattern, she almost missed it. It was late, she'd just turned the TV off after watching a documentary, and in that brief half-second flash of static before the screen died completely, she saw something. Not a clear image, but a fleeting impression of organized shapes within the chaos, like ripples on water or faint geometric lines. It was gone before her brain could fully register it. Weird visual artifact, she thought, shrugging it off and heading to bed. But it happened again a few nights later. A longer flash of static this time, maybe 2 full seconds. And the pattern was clearer, intricate, repeating lines, almost like a complex Celtic knot or a strange, unfamiliar circuitry diagram, shimmering just beneath the surface of the noisy snow. It was strangely beautiful, yet deeply unsettling. Why would static form such a distinct, organized pattern? She started paying closer attention. Now, every time the static flickered, she looked for it. And she always found it. The pattern was consistent, always the same complex design, though sometimes appearing faded, sometimes startlingly sharp within the visual noise. The unease grew. It felt wrong. Static was supposed to be random, meaningless chaos. This felt structured. Intentional. Like a hidden message embedded in the noise, or a glimpse into something operating behind the screen. She mentioned it to her brother over the phone. "Hey, you know that old TV here? Sometimes when there's static, I see this weird, really detailed pattern in it. Like, the same pattern every time." He laughed. "That's called pareidolia, Eli. Your brain's trying to make sense of random noise. You're seeing shapes that aren't really there. Like seeing faces in clouds. His explanation made sense, logically. But it didn't feel right. The pattern seemed too consistent, too complex to be a mere trick of the mind. And the feeling she got when she saw it, a cold prickle down her spine, a tightening in her chest, felt instinctual, like a warning. Then, the faces started. It wasn't immediate. At first, nestled within the intricate lines of the now familiar pattern, she began to perceive suggestions of faces. Vague ovals, dark smudges where eyes might be. Still easily dismissible as pareidolia. But one night, as she switched from her streaming device back to regular cable, the static flashed longer than ever before, a full 5 seconds. And within the pattern, crystal clear for a terrifying moment, was a face. Pale, indistinct features, but undeniably a human face, staring directly out at her from within the swirling chaos of the static. Its expression was neutral, blank, which somehow made it even more horrifying than a grimace or a smile. Eliza gasped, stumbling back from the screen. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The static vanished, replaced by a blaring commercial, but the image of the face was burned into her retinas. She couldn't dismiss it anymore. That was not her brain making patterns. She had seen a face. Sleep became difficult. Every shadow in her apartment seemed deeper, potentially hiding something. She started avoiding the television, leaving it off for days at a time. But the silence felt heavy, expectant. One evening, needing a distraction, she reluctantly turned it on to watch a familiar sitcom. As the opening credits rolled, the screen flickered, static again. This time, there wasn't just one face, but multiple faces embedded within the pattern. Dozens, maybe hundreds, layered over each other, all pale and blank, their indistinct eyes seeming to fix on her. They weren't just in the static, they felt like they were the static, looking out from some impossible dimension behind the glass. She scrambled for the remote, fumbling, and hit the power button. The screen went black, but for a terrifying instant after the power cut, she could still see the faint, residual glow of the patterned faces fading slowly on the dark screen. That night, she unplugged the television completely. She felt a small measure of relief, thinking she'd cut off the source. But around 3 a.m., she woke suddenly. The room was pitch black, silent. Yet she heard it. A faint, crackling hiss, like static, seeming to emanate from the corner where the unplugged television sat. And beneath the hiss, a sound like faint, overlapping whispers. She lay frozen in bed, drenched in sweat, too terrified to move, listening to the phantom static breathe in the darkness until the first hint of dawn broke the spell. The next day, she dragged the heavy television out of her apartment and left it by the dumpsters in the alley, ignoring the landlord's rules about electronic disposal. She needed it gone. For a while, peace returned. No static, no patterns, no faces. She bought a new, sleek smart TV and felt the knot of anxiety in her chest slowly loosen. Until one rainy afternoon, she was video chatting with her brother on her laptop. The connection momentarily dipped, causing his image to pixelate and freeze. For just a fraction of a second, before the picture cleared, the blocky, distorted pixels resolved into something horrifyingly familiar, faint, swirling lines, the barest suggestion of that intricate pattern, shimmering within the digital disruption. Eliza's blood ran cold. She ended the call abruptly, claiming a bad connection, her hand trembling as she closed the laptop lid. It wasn't the old TV. It was never just the TV. Now, she sees traces of it everywhere. A flicker of corrupted video online. The snow on a security camera feed glimpsed in a store. Even sometimes, just for a heartbeat, in the noisy grain of a photograph taken in low light. The pattern, and the suggestion of the blank faces within it, hiding in the visual chaos of the modern world. She doesn't know what it is, or what it wants. Is it a signal bleeding through from somewhere else? A glitch in reality itself? Or has she just become attuned to seeing patterns where none exist, forever haunted by the memory of the faces and the static? All she knows is that static is no longer random noise to her. It's a screen, a veil. And she constantly wonders, with a fear that never truly fades, what might be looking back from the other side, waiting in the chaos between the signals. Have you ever looked closely at the static? Really looked? The mimic in the mirror. It started with a lag, almost imperceptible. Standing in front of her bathroom mirror one morning, brushing her teeth, Maya felt like her reflection's movements were lagging just a fraction of a second behind her own. Like a tiny delay on a bad video call. She paused, toothbrush hovering. Her reflection paused too, exactly mimicking her puzzled expression. Must be tired, she thought, shaking her head slightly. Her reflection dutifully shook its head too, perfectly in sync this time. She finished brushing and dismissed it. But over the next few days, she noticed it again. A minuscule delay when she raised her hand to fix her hair. A split-second hesitation before her reflection blinked after she did. It was so subtle, so fleeting, that she constantly questioned if she was imagining it. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe her eyes were playing tricks. She started testing it, making quick, deliberate movements in front of the mirror. A swift head turn. Raising an eyebrow. Sometimes the reflection was perfectly synchronized. Other times, there it was, that tiny, almost imperceptible stutter, that fraction of a second delay before the image in the glass caught up. The rational part of her brain insisted it was impossible. Mirrors reflect light instantly. There couldn't be a delay. Yet, she was seeing it. Or at least, she thought she was. The doubt itself became unsettling. Then, it escalated slightly. One evening, while washing her face, she glanced up quickly. For the briefest instant, before her own eyes focused properly in the mirror, she thought her reflection's eyes looked different. Darker, maybe. Wider. By the time her gaze sharpened, the reflection was normal again, just her own tired face staring back. But the image lingered, unsettling her. She started avoiding looking directly into her own eyes in the mirror, focusing instead on her hair or her teeth. But the feeling persisted. Sometimes, out of the corner of her eye, she'd catch the reflection holding an expression for a microsecond longer than she was, or its smile seeming just a little too fixed, a little off. The true terror began the night she saw it twitch. She was leaning close to the mirror, examining a small blemish on her chin. She was perfectly still, concentrating. Suddenly, in her peripheral vision, the reflection's index finger, the one resting near its temple in the mirror image, gave a distinct, tiny twitch. A movement she absolutely had not made. Maya recoiled, heart slamming against her ribs. She stared, wide-eyed, at the reflection. It stared back, perfectly still now, mimicking her shock flawlessly. But she had seen it. There was no doubt this time. It wasn't lag, it was independent movement. Panic set in. She backed away from the mirror, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She fled the bathroom, pulling the door shut behind her, leaning against it as if to hold something back. Sleep was impossible. Her mind raced. What was happening? Was she hallucinating? Was something wrong with the mirror itself? It was just a standard, builder-grade mirror that had been there when she moved in. She began avoiding mirrors altogether. She covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. She turned the full-length mirror in her hallway to face the wall. She tried using only the small compact mirror in her purse, holding it at odd angles, trying not to catch her own full gaze. But the feeling of being mimicked, of being watched by her own reflection, didn't entirely disappear. Sometimes, catching her reflection unexpectedly in a darkened windowpane or the screen of her turned-off phone, she'd feel that same jolt of wrongness, a perceived lag, a fleeting strangeness in the eyes staring back. Was it spreading? Or was her fear just making her see it everywhere? She considered telling someone, but how could she explain it without sounding completely unhinged? My reflection is lagging and sometimes it twitches. Weeks passed in a state of low-grade anxiety. She functioned, went to work, saw friends, but the fear simmered beneath the surface. She grew pale, her movements sometimes jerky as she subconsciously tried to avoid reflective surfaces. One afternoon, needing to fix her smudged eyeliner before a meeting, she was forced to use the bathroom mirror at work. She took a deep breath, pulled back the towel she'd instinctively started carrying even outside her home, and leaned in, focusing only on her eye. She carefully dabbed at the smudge with a tissue. Her hand was steady. She concentrated. Then, she made the mistake of letting her gaze drift upward slightly, meeting the eyes of her reflection. The reflection wasn't looking at her eye. It was looking directly at her. And it wasn't mirroring her focused, slightly stressed expression. The reflection was smiling. A slow, wide, deliberate smile that didn't touch its eyes. A smile Maya was most definitely not making. Maya choked back a scream, dropping the tissue. She stared, frozen in horror, at the smiling face wearing her features in the glass. The smile held for a terrifyingly long moment, cold and knowing, before snapping back into perfect mimicry of Maya's own horrified expression. She fled the bathroom, shaking violently, locking herself in a stall until her breathing evened out. She doesn't know what the mimic wants, or what it is. Is it tied to her? To all reflections? Is it getting stronger? She lives in a world where she dreads her own image. She takes quick, furtive glances when necessary, always afraid of seeing the lag, the twitch, the independent, horrifying smile. She avoids video calls when possible. She covers the reflective surfaces in her home. But she knows it's still there, just behind the glass, wearing her face. Waiting. Watching. Perfectly mimicking her fear, most of the time. How long does it take your reflection to copy your movements? Have you ever watched it closely? Really closely? Are you sure it always keeps up? The suggested route. Like millions of others, Tom relied implicitly on his phone's navigation app. He called it NavPal, and it guided him through traffic, found shortcuts, and located obscure addresses with near-flawless accuracy. He trusted the calm, synthesized voice and the blue line snaking across the digital map. Until the suggested route started feeling wrong. It began subtly. Driving home late from a friend's house across town, NavPal suggested an unusual detour. Turn left onto Willow Creek Lane, the voice instructed calmly. Tom frowned. Willow Creek Lane was a narrow, poorly lit residential street that, as far as he knew, didn't connect back to the main road efficiently. The app usually routed him differently. Weird algorithm update, maybe, he muttered, glancing at the estimated arrival time. It added 5 minutes to his trip. Annoying, but plausible. He followed the instruction, navigating the dark, quiet street before eventually rejoining his normal route. A few days later, driving to a new client meeting in an unfamiliar industrial park, NavPal again offered a strange directive. In 500 feet, turn right. The indicated turn led down a gravel track that seemed to disappear between two dilapidated warehouses. The main paved road continued straight ahead. Recalculating, Tom said aloud, hoping to trigger the app, but it remained silent, the blue line stubbornly pointing down the gravel path. He hesitated. This felt more than just inefficient, it felt unsafe. He ignored the instruction and continued straight. The app took a moment, then silently recalculated, plotting a new course along the proper road without comment. He felt a prickle of unease but brushed it off as a mapping error for a less traveled area. The incidents became more frequent and more bizarre. NavPal started suggesting turns onto roads that looked like private driveways, directing him through complex, empty parking lots late at night, or routing him onto service roads that ran parallel to the perfectly good highway he was already on. Each time, ignoring the instruction would force a silent recalculation. The app never offered an explanation, never flagged these routes as faster or necessary to avoid traffic. They just appeared. He checked for app updates, cleared the cache, even restarted his phone multiple times. Nothing changed. He mentioned it to his girlfriend, Chloe. "That's super weird," she'd said. "Mine does that sometimes, tries to take me through weird neighborhoods. I think they're trying out new, scenic route algorithms or something." But Tom didn't think these routes were scenic. They often felt deserted, neglected, sometimes leading towards places that felt distinctly unwelcoming, the back alleys of closed strip malls, the service entrances of imposing institutional buildings, roads that skirted the edges of overgrown cemeteries. The turning point came during a nighttime drive back from visiting his parents upstate. He was on a long, dark stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town. NavPal suddenly chirped, "In 1 mile, take the exit." Tom glanced at the screen. There was an exit coming up, but it wasn't for any marked road. It looked like an old, decommissioned ramp, barely visible in his headlights, overgrown with weeds. His usual exit was another 15 miles down the highway. "Where does that even go?" he asked the empty car. The blue line on the screen extended from the phantom exit onto what looked like blank space on the map, no roads, no labels, just ending abruptly in the gray unknown after about half a mile. "Take the exit," the calm voice repeated. A chill snaked down Tom's spine. This wasn't inefficient, this was nonsensical. Dangerous, even. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. He kept driving straight, past the dark, overgrown exit ramp. As he passed it, the app didn't recalculate immediately. Instead, the synthesized voice spoke again, but this time it sounded different. The calm cadence was still there, but it was flatter, slower, almost disappointed. "Route missed," it stated. Then the screen flickered, the map dissolved into digital static for a split second, much like an old TV losing signal, and then it snapped back, silently plotting the correct route towards his actual exit further down the highway. The pattern in the plaster. It started subtly, the way these things always seem to. Maya had been living in the old apartment for about 3 months. It was cheap, spacious for the city, and had charming, if slightly crumbling, plaster walls with intricate, almost floral patterns pressed into them near the ceiling. She'd barely noticed the patterns until the 3rd week of November. She was working late on her laptop, the only light coming from the screen and a single floor lamp in the corner. The silence of the old building was deep, punctuated only by the distant rumble of the subway and the occasional creak of settling wood. That's when she saw it, or thought she did. On the wall opposite her desk, high up near the ceiling trim, a small section of the plaster pattern seemed to shift. It wasn't a crack spreading or dust falling. It was more like a ripple, a brief, liquid distortion that made the raised floral design momentarily blur, like heat haze over asphalt. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, attributing it to fatigue. She'd been staring at the screen for hours. Probably just eye strain. She looked again. The wall was perfectly still, the pattern crisp under the dim lamplight. But a seed of unease had been planted. Over the next few nights, she found her gaze drifting back to that spot. Nothing happened. She started to relax, telling herself she'd imagined it. Then, one evening, while reading on the couch, she saw it again. This time, it wasn't just a ripple. A small, distinct spiral shape within the larger floral pattern seemed to slowly, almost imperceptibly, rotate. Like a tiny gear grinding within the wall. It turned maybe a quarter rotation over several seconds, then stopped. Her heart gave a hard thump against her ribs. She stood up, walked closer to the wall, running her fingers over the plaster. It was cold, solid, utterly immobile. There was no mechanism, no vibration, nothing to explain what she thought she'd seen. She took photos with her phone, zooming in, comparing them later. Nothing looked out of place. She tried to rationalize. Old buildings settle. Maybe temperature changes caused minute expansions and contractions in the plaster. It seemed unlikely to manifest as a precise rotation in one small detail. The disturbances became more frequent, though still maddeningly subtle. Sometimes it was the ripple effect, spreading slightly further along the trim. Other times, it was the slow rotation of different small elements within the plaster pattern, a leaf shape curling slightly tighter, a bud seeming to unfurl by a hair's breadth. It only ever happened late at night, when the building was quiet, and always when she was alone. Sleep became difficult. She'd lie in bed, staring at the shadowed patterns on her bedroom ceiling, convinced they were moving just outside her peripheral vision. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the radiators, felt connected to the subtle voodoo occurring on the walls. She started leaving lights on, hoping the brightness would deter whatever it was. It didn't. The patterns shifted regardless, their movements seemingly more confident under direct light. She mentioned it tentatively to her landlord, an old man who shrugged it off. Plaster dust, maybe. Old places breathe, you know. He didn't seem concerned. She thought about calling a building inspector, but what would she say? "Excuse me, I think the decorative swirls on my wall are moving slightly." She felt ridiculous. One Friday night, exhausted and frayed, she decided to confront it. She sat directly facing the wall, light on, phone ready to record. For almost an hour, nothing happened. The plaster remained stubbornly inert. Just as she was about to give up, convincing herself she was truly losing her grip, it started. Not just one small spiral, but a whole section of the pattern began to move. It wasn't random shifting, it was coordinated. Multiple floral elements rotated in unison, ripples flowed outwards from a central point and then back inwards, like a slow, silent tide pulsing within the wall. It was mesmerizing and deeply horrifying. The pattern wasn't just moving, it was behaving. It felt deliberate, almost organic. She managed to record about 30 seconds of it before her hand started shaking too badly. Watching the playback later sent ice water through her veins. The video was clear. The pattern was moving. It undulated, pulsed, shifted in ways that defied physics. There was no sound, just the silent, impossible animation embedded in the solid wall. That night, the feeling of being watched, which had been a low hum of anxiety before, became an overwhelming certainty. It felt like the wall itself was aware of her, its countless plaster eyes observing her reaction. The subtle movements took on a new character, less like random shifts, more like breathing. A slow, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to sync with the deepest silences of the night. She couldn't stay. The next morning, numb with lack of sleep and a creeping dread that felt like it was physically crawling under her skin, she started packing. She avoided looking directly at the pattern trim, but she could feel it. A silent, expectant energy radiating from the walls. As she carried the last box out, she paused at the doorway, forcing herself to look back one last time. The apartment was empty, bathed in the gray morning light. She scanned the walls near the ceiling. The plaster pattern was still. Perfectly, unervingly still. But just as she turned to leave, she saw it out of the corner of her eye. High up on the wall facing the hallway, outside her apartment door, a small section of the identical plaster pattern rippled. A slow, languid pulse that seemed to acknowledge her departure. Maya didn't wait. She fled the building, not stopping until she was miles away, surrounded by the noise and anonymity of the city. She never went back, abandoning her deposit and several belongings. Sometimes, late at night in her new, modern apartment with its plain, unadorned walls, she finds herself staring intently at the smooth drywall, her heart pounding. She reassures herself there are no patterns here, nothing to watch her, nothing to move. But occasionally, when the city outside falls into a rare moment of quiet, she thinks she can feel it. A faint, rhythmic pulsing in the very structure around her. Like the building itself is taking a slow, deep breath. And she wonders if the pattern wasn't just in the plaster, but if the plaster was just the place it chose to show itself. And she wonders where it might show itself next. The mimic in the mirror. Liam first noticed it on a Tuesday morning. Standing bleary-eyed in front of his bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, he caught a flicker of movement that didn't match his own. His reflection's hand, holding the toothbrush, seemed to lag just a fraction of a second behind his real one as he brought it up. He paused, watching intently. He moved his hand again, slowly this time. The reflection mirrored him perfectly. He blinked, shook his head. Too little sleep, too much coffee yesterday. He finished brushing, splashed water on his face, and forgot about it. Until Thursday. This time, as he leaned closer to check for stray hairs after shaving, his reflection's eyes seemed off. They met his gaze, but there was a momentary blankness, a split-second delay before they focused, almost as if the image was catching up. A tiny chill traced its way down his spine. He tapped the glass. Solid. Cold. His reflection tapped back, perfectly synchronized. He told himself it was the lighting, the steam, his imagination. But the feeling lingered. He started watching his reflection more closely, not just in the bathroom mirror, but in shop windows, the reflective surface of his phone screen, the polished elevator doors at work. They all seemed normal. It was only his mirror, the large, plain one fixed to the wall above his bathroom sink. The incidents became slightly more frequent, always subtle, always deniable. A head turn that completed a microsecond too late. A smile in the reflection that didn't quite seem to reach the eyes, holding a hint of something flat and watchful. He started performing little tests, quick movements, sudden expressions. The reflection always mimicked him, but sometimes, just sometimes, there was that infinitesimal hesitation, that fractional lag that felt like buffering. He began to feel watched, even when he wasn't in the bathroom. He'd be reading in the living room and get the distinct sensation of eyes on the back of his neck, emanating from the direction of the closed bathroom door. He tried covering the mirror with a towel. It helped, slightly, but the feeling didn't vanish entirely. It felt muffled, patient, waiting behind the terry cloth. One night, unable to shake the unease, he stood before the covered mirror. His heart pounded. He slowly reached out and pulled the towel away. His reflection stared back, perfectly still. But its expression, it wasn't his own tired, anxious look. It was an expression of mild annoyance, quickly smoothed away into neutrality as their eyes met. Liam felt his blood run cold. He hadn't imagined that. The reflection had reacted to the towel being removed before he himself had fully registered his own expression. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off the mirror until he was out of the bathroom, pulling the door shut with a soft click. He didn't sleep in his bedroom that night, opting for the lumpy couch, leaving the bathroom light on. The next day, he avoided the bathroom mirror altogether, using the small, cracked mirror in the hallway closet instead. But the feeling of being observed persisted, stronger now, a low hum of awareness throughout the apartment. He felt a growing pressure, a sense that the thing in the mirror was becoming impatient. Driven by a mixture of fear and a desperate need for proof, he decided on one last test that evening. He stood before the bathroom mirror, phone held discreetly at his side, recording video. He went through his nightly routine, washing his face, brushing his teeth, forcing himself to act normally, though his hands trembled. He moved deliberately, watching his reflection. It was flawless, mimicking every tiny motion. Then, he did something unplanned. Mid-brushstroke, he suddenly dropped the toothbrush into the sink with a clatter and spun away from the mirror, turning his back completely. He waited 3 seconds, heart hammering, then spun back around. His reflection was still facing the mirror, mirroring his shocked expression from before he turned away. It hadn't turned its back. For a terrifying instant, the image in the glass was him, frozen in surprise, while the real Liam stared at its unmoving back. Then, with a speed that was nauseatingly fluid, the reflection snapped around to face him again, its expression perfectly matching his current horror. But Liam had seen it. The incontrovertible proof. It wasn't just lagging, it was operating independently. He didn't scream. A cold, paralyzing dread locked his throat. He backed out of the bathroom, grabbed his keys and wallet, and fled the apartment, not bothering to lock the door. He spent the night at a cheap motel across town, leaving the bathroom light off and avoiding glancing at the mirror above the dresser. Sleep was impossible. The image of his reflection, facing the wrong way, was burned into his mind. What was it? What did it want? Why his mirror? He never went back to the apartment. He called the landlord, gave a vague excuse about a family emergency, and arranged for a friend to pack his essential belongings, instructing him explicitly not to touch or cover the bathroom mirror. He lost his deposit and most of his stuff, but he didn't care. Liam moved to a new apartment, one with no large, fixed mirrors. He bought small, freestanding ones he could turn to the wall or put away. For weeks, he avoided his own reflection as much as possible. The intense feeling of being watched faded, replaced by a constant, low-level anxiety. He thought, maybe, he was safe. Then one rainy afternoon, he was waiting for a bus, staring absently at his faint reflection in the dark glass of the bus shelter. The streetlights flickered on behind him. In the glass, his reflection turned its head to look at the lights fractionally before he did. A familiar cold dread washed over Liam. It wasn't the mirror. It was him. Or rather, it was the thing that mimicked him. And it had followed. He looked around wildly, but the street was just wet pavement and hurried pedestrians. He looked back at the glass. His reflection smiled, a wide, slow smile that didn't reach its eyes, holding nothing but cold, patient awareness. It knew he'd seen it. And the horror wasn't just that it mimicked him, it was the chilling implication that maybe, just maybe, it was getting better at it. The rule of 3 knocks. It started with a misplaced grocery list. Clara was sure she'd left it on the kitchen counter, but after searching everywhere, she found it tucked neatly inside her shoe by the front door. Strange, but she shrugged it off, blaming her own forgetfulness. A few days later, her favorite mug, the blue one she always used for morning tea, vanished from the drying rack. She spent 10 minutes hunting for it before finding it sitting perfectly centered on her closed laptop lid in the living room. Again, weird. Annoying, even. But explainable. Maybe she was more tired than she realized. The small, inexplicable relocations continued. Keys appearing on the bookshelf, a book from her nightstand found balanced on the bathroom faucet, her reading glasses perched atop a lampshade. It was never destructive, just odd. Precise, almost deliberate placements of everyday objects in places they absolutely shouldn't be. Clara started doubting herself, wondering if she was developing memory problems or even sleepwalking. She lived alone in a quiet apartment building, locks always secured. There was no sign of forced entry. She even set up her phone to record the living room one night, but the footage showed nothing but empty, silent hours. Then came the knocks. It was late, nearing midnight. Clara was drifting off to sleep when she heard it, 3 distinct, quiet knocks. Tap. 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 They weren't loud, not like someone urgently demanding entry. They sounded like they came from inside her apartment. Maybe the bedroom door. Heart pounding, she sat up, listening intently. Silence. Just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Probably the pipes settling, she told herself, although it hadn't sounded metallic. It had sounded like knuckles on wood. She forced herself to lie back down, pulling the covers tighter. The next night, it happened again. Tap. 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 Same time, same quiet deliberation. This time, it sounded closer, perhaps from the closet door across the room. Goosebumps rose on her arms. She whispered, "Who's there?" Her voice trembled in the stillness. No response. Only the heavy silence pressing back. She didn't sleep well after that. The misplaced objects continued, becoming slightly more unsettling. A kitchen knife laid carefully on her pillow, she found it before getting into bed, thankfully, her toothbrush standing upright in the sugar bowl. The daytime oddities felt mischievous, but the nighttime knocks felt different. They felt like a prelude. On the third night of the knocks, Clara was ready. She sat awake in bed, a heavy flashlight clutched in her hand. Midnight arrived. Silence stretched. Then, tap. 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 This time, it was undeniably coming from her bedroom window, the one overlooking a quiet alley 3 floors down. Impossible. Her breath hitched. With trembling hands, she aimed the flashlight beam at the window. Nothing. Just the dark glass reflecting her own wide, terrified eyes. But as she held the beam steady, she heard it again, softer now, almost hesitant. Tap. Tap, followed by a faint, dry scrape against the glass. She scrambled out of bed, backing away towards the bedroom door, flashlight beam still fixed on the window. She fumbled for the light switch, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. The scraping stopped. The window was empty, untouched. No ledges outside, no fire escape nearby. Nothing could logically be at her third-floor window, knocking. The next day, Clara felt like she was living in a different reality. The air in her apartment felt thick, charged. She noticed a pattern she hadn't consciously registered before. The misplaced objects always seemed to be things she had recently touched or used. The grocery list, the mug, the keys, the knife, the toothbrush. That evening, desperate, she searched online forums for objects moving on their own, phantom knocking, anything. She found scattered accounts, urban legends, but nothing concrete. Then she stumbled upon an obscure forum thread discussing old folklore. It mentioned a superstition, the rule of 3 knocks. The post was fragmented, poorly written, but the gist was terrifying. It spoke of a presence, a collector of sorts, that signals its interest by subtly moving personal items. If the inhabitant ignores or rationalizes these signs, the presence escalates. It begins knocking, 3 knocks, each night, from a different location within the dwelling, drawing closer. The folklore warned, never acknowledge the 3rd knock on the 3rd night. Don't respond, don't investigate, don't even look towards the source. Acknowledging it, the thread claimed, confirmed an invitation. Clara's blood ran cold. Last night had been the 3rd night of knocks. And she had looked. She had shone the flashlight directly at the window. She spent the rest of the evening in a state of near panic. What had she invited? The misplaced objects seemed to stop. The apartment was eerily still. No keys on bookshelves, no mugs on laptops. My reflection was there, dimly visible, but behind it, deeper within the blackness, something pale had shifted. Like a face turning away just as I looked. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Must be exhaustion, screen fatigue playing tricks. I shrugged it off, gathered my things, and left. The next night, it happened again. I powered down, and as the screen went dark, I watched it intently. For a split second, clear as day, I saw a face in the monitor's black depths. It wasn't mine. It was pale, featureless except for 2 dark smudges where eyes should be, and it was looking straight out. Then, it vanished, leaving only my own wide-eyed reflection staring back. My heart hammered. I flicked the monitor back on, the familiar desktop appeared. Off again, just blackness and my reflection. I checked the power cord, the connections. Everything was normal. I told myself it was a strange afterimage, a weird burnout on the screen phosphors. But it hadn't looked like a technical glitch. It had looked intentional. Over the next few nights, the phenomenon became more persistent. Every time I turned off the monitor, the pale face would appear for a second or 2 in the dark screen. Sometimes it was looking straight out. Sometimes it seemed turned slightly to the side. It never moved much, just lingered, observing, before fading. I started dreading the end of my workday. I'd leave the monitor on longer than necessary, staring at bright web pages, anything to avoid that moment of powering down. I tried cleaning the screen meticulously, thinking it was some bizarre smudge. No change. One night, driven by a mix of terror and morbid curiosity, I decided to test it. I turned off the monitor, waited for the face to appear in the blackness, then slowly raised my right hand. My dim reflection raised its hand too, of course. But the pale face behind it remained still for a beat, then, with a slight, almost imperceptible delay, a pale shape mimicking my hand drifted up beside it. A cold wave washed over me. It wasn't just an image. It was mimicking me, but out of sync, like a bad video feed from another dimension. I tried recording it with my phone. I pointed the camera at the monitor, turned the screen off, and watched the pale face appear. I waved my hand. The mimic hand lagged behind. But when I played the video back, my phone screen showed nothing but the blank, black monitor reflecting me and my phone. The pale face, the mimicry, it wasn't captured. Only I could see it. That realization was worse than seeing the face itself. Was I hallucinating? Was the stress finally getting to me? Yet, the experience felt utterly real, chillingly consistent. The mimicry became more pronounced. If I turned my head, the pale face would turn a fraction of a second later. If I leaned forward, its shape would loom closer in the dark glass after a sickening pause. It never matched my expression, it had no features, but the intention of mirroring me was undeniable, and terrifyingly flawed. It felt like something unintelligent, something other, was learning to copy, badly. I couldn't work like this. I started taking my laptop home, avoiding the office monitor altogether. But then, I began catching glimpses elsewhere. In the dark screen of my TV after turning it off. In the black, inactive screen of my phone when it lay on the table. That same pale, featureless face, sometimes accompanied by a laggy, ghostly mimicry of my own nearby movements. It wasn't tied to the office monitor. It was tied to dark screens. I live alone. The nights are long. I've started covering my TV, my laptop screen, even my phone screen when I'm not using them. I use thick cloths, anything opaque. It feels absurd, like a child hiding from monsters. But even with the screens covered, I know what's potentially behind the cloth. I can almost feel it, waiting in the glassy blackness. Sometimes, I catch myself staring at a covered screen, imagining the pale face appearing beneath the fabric, mimicking my stare with its featureless gaze, just a half second behind reality. How long before the delay disappears? How long before it learns to mimic perfectly? And what happens then? Last night, I uncovered my phone screen just to check the time. In the instant before the display lit up, I saw it. The pale face. And for the first time, it wasn't just mimicking. In the fraction of a second it was visible, I could have sworn, it smiled. Think about it. How many dark screens are looking at you right now? What do you see when you really look into the black? The floor plan shifts. I've lived in the Oakhaven apartments for 5 years. It's an old brick building, the kind with slightly uneven floors, radiators that hiss in the winter, and a faint smell of dust and decades passed in the hallways. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. Familiar. At least, it was familiar. It started subtly, about 2 months ago. I came home late from work, exhausted, fumbling for my keys at apartment 4B. As I unlocked the door, my hand brushed against the wall beside the frame, and I paused. There was a small, hairline crack in the plaster running vertically from the top of the doorframe. I frowned. I'd never noticed it before. Must have missed it, I thought, too tired to care much. A week later, the crack was gone. The plaster was smooth, seamless, as if it had never existed. I ran my fingers over the spot. No sign of patching, no difference in paint texture. That was odd. Maybe maintenance fixed it without leaving a note. Unlikely, they usually leave notices. I shrugged it off, deciding I must have imagined the crack in the first place. Then came the door. Down the hall from me, near the stairwell, there's always been a blank stretch of wall. One Tuesday morning, heading out, I saw a door there. A plain, cheap wooden door, flush with the wall, painted the same drab beige as the hallway. No number, no handle, just the door itself set into the wall where only plaster had been the night before. My steps faltered. I stopped and stared. It looked like it had always been there, slightly dusty, fitting perfectly. I pushed on it. It swung inward silently, revealing a shallow, narrow closet. Empty. Bare wood shelves, dusty floor. Nothing inside. I pulled it shut, the latch clicking softly. My heart was doing a weird fluttery thing. I knew that closet wasn't there yesterday. I walked that hall every single day. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was an access panel I'd never registered. But it looked like a standard door, and why would it suddenly appear? I asked my neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Gable, later that day. The little closet by the stairs? Oh yes, dear, that's always been there. Hardly ever used, I imagine. Her certainty just made me feel worse, planting a seed of doubt about my own memory. Things got quieter after that, for a bit. Or maybe I was just trying harder not to notice. But then the sound started. Faint scraping noises, like something dragging, coming from inside the walls at night. Not rats, I know what rats sound like. This was slower, heavier. And sometimes, a soft, whispery sound, like sand shifting behind the plaster, always seeming to come from walls that bordered empty air or the hallway. The layout began to feel inconsistent. One night, walking back from the laundry room in the basement, the hallway leading to my apartment seemed longer. The usual 10 paces felt like 15. The pattern on the worn carpet seemed to repeat more times than it should. My skin prickled. I hurried the last few steps, unlocked my door, and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it, breathing hard. The next morning, the hallway felt perfectly normal again. Was I losing my mind? Stress. Lack of sleep. I needed proof. I dug out the old, faded copy of the building's floor plan I'd received when I first moved in. I smoothed it out on my kitchen table. There it was, apartment 4B, the hallway, the stairwell, and a solid, unbroken line representing the wall where the strange closet door now stood. No closet marked. No access panel. Just wall. Relief warred with terror. I wasn't crazy. The building was changing. But how? Why? The changes became more frequent, though still subtle. A window in the stairwell landing seemed slightly wider one day. The ceiling in the lobby felt lower the next. Each time, the change was small enough to make me doubt myself moments later. The scraping sounds behind the walls grew a little louder some nights. Last night was the worst. I woke up needing water around 3 a.m. I padded out of my bedroom, through my small living room towards the kitchen. I stopped dead in the doorway. The layout of my own apartment was wrong. The kitchen sink, which should have been directly across from the fridge, was now situated on the adjacent wall. The counter space was different, the cupboards subtly rearranged. It was still my kitchen, my things were there, but the structure had shifted overnight. I backed away slowly, my entire body trembling. I didn't turn on the light. I just stood in the dark living room, staring at the impossible kitchen layout. The scraping sound started then, louder than ever, seeming to come from directly beneath my feet, under the floorboards. I didn't go back to bed. I sat on my couch until dawn, clutching a heavy book, listening to the scraping fade as the sun rose. The kitchen layout, when I finally dared to look in the daylight, was back to normal. Sink across from the fridge. Everything as it should be. But I know what I saw. I know this building isn't just old, it's wrong. It rearranges itself in the dead of night, shifting walls, adding doors, lengthening hallways, changing the very floor plan around its sleeping occupants. I need to leave. But a horrifying thought keeps looping in my head: if the building can change its internal layout, can it change the way out? What if, one night, I open my apartment door and the hallway outside isn't the one I know? What if it leads somewhere else entirely within these shifting brick walls? The sun is setting now. The radiators are starting their nightly hissing. And I swear, the wall opposite my couch looks just a few inches closer than it did this morning. I only know that it's out there, spreading quietly. A mental contagion passed through a glance, a photo, a description, a doodle. An impossible loop you can't unsee, waiting patiently in the forgotten corners and in the quiet spaces of the mind, replicating itself one glimpse at a time. And the most unsettling part is wondering how many people now carry it, completely unaware they are hosts to a silent, looping unease. The unsent letter. When my great-aunt Alara passed away, I inherited her small, cluttered cottage by the sea. Sorting through her belongings felt like excavating layers of a quiet, solitary life. In the back of a wardrobe, tucked beneath yellowed linens, I found an antique wooden writing box. It smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Inside, nestled amongst dried flowers and faded ribbons, was a single, sealed letter. The envelope was thick, creamy parchment, addressed in elegant, looping script to a Mr. Alastair Finch, but with no street address, city, or stamp. The wax seal on the back, bearing an indistinct floral crest, was unbroken. Curiosity warred with a sense of privacy. Who was Alastair? Why was the letter never sent? Holding it, I felt a strange weight, not just physical, but emotional. A profound, inexplicable wave of melancholy washed over me for a moment, as sudden and unexpected as a rogue wave hitting the shore outside. I dismissed it as grief for my aunt, the atmosphere of the old house, maybe even the scent of the dried lavender triggering a memory. Respecting the unbroken seal, I placed the letter back in the box and set it aside on the mantelpiece, intending to research Alastair Finch later. That night, sleep was difficult. Not because of noise, but because of an oppressive sadness that settled in my chest, a heavy, tearless ache I couldn't trace to any specific thought. It felt foreign, borrowed. I kept thinking of lonely shores and words left unsaid. Once, I woke abruptly, certain I'd heard the faint sound of someone weeping softly nearby, but the cottage was utterly silent save for the sighing wind. A few days later, my friend Maya came to help me sort through books. She admired the writing box. "This is beautiful," she said, picking it up carefully. "What's the letter?" "Unsent, apparently," I replied, explaining my find. "Addressed to some Alastair Finch. Feels strangely sad, doesn't it?" I gestured vaguely at the box. Maya held the sealed letter for a moment, turning it over in her hands, her brow furrowed slightly. "Yeah," she murmured. "It does have a sort of heavy feeling." She put it back carefully. We worked for hours, packing books, sharing memories of my aunt. But I noticed Maya grew quieter as the afternoon wore on. By the time she left, she seemed subdued, her usual bright energy dimmed. I chalked it up to the slightly gloomy task of dealing with remnants of the past. The next day, Maya called. "Weird thing," she said, her voice sounding flat. "I've been feeling so incredibly down since yesterday. Like, really profoundly sad, and I have no idea why. Nothing happened. Did sorting through your aunt's things maybe just get to me more than I thought?" A cold knot formed in my stomach. Down how? "Just, heavy," she struggled to explain. "Like carrying a huge weight. I keep wanting to cry, but I can't. And I had the strangest dream last night. I was standing on a foggy beach, waiting for someone who never arrived. Waiting for someone who never arrived. Like an unsent letter." My gaze drifted to the writing box on the mantelpiece. The connection felt tenuous, illogical, but terrifyingly real. Had Maya caught the sadness just by holding the letter? My own melancholy hadn't lifted, if anything, it felt deeper, intertwined now with a growing unease. I started noticing fleeting things, a whiff of unfamiliar, old-fashioned perfume in empty rooms, the peripheral sense of a figure in outdated clothing standing just out of sight, the recurrence of that soft, spectral weeping when the house was quietest. It felt like Aunt Alara's quiet sadness, amplified by the unsent letter, was leaking into the present. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I dove into my aunt's diaries and old family albums. I found mentions of a young man named Alastair Finch, someone Alara had been deeply in love with decades ago, before he moved away abruptly, communication ceasing. There were pages filled with aching loneliness and unspoken words. The final entry about him simply read, "Wrote to Alastair today. Perhaps this time." The diary ended shortly after. She had likely written a letter, full of decades of pent-up emotion, but for some reason, fear, pride, hopelessness, she never sent it. She died with that intense, unresolved longing trapped within the sealed envelope. The horror was understanding that this potent emotion, this lifetime of regret and sorrow, had somehow imbued the physical object. It wasn't a traditional haunting by a spirit, but by the feeling itself. And it was contagious. Touching the letter, perhaps even being near the box with intent or sensitivity, allowed that profound sadness to latch onto a new host. Maya had held it. I had held it. I knew I couldn't leave it where someone else might find it, touch it, and become infected by this quiet, devastating sorrow. Destroying it felt wrong, disrespectful to my aunt's trapped emotions. Burning it might release the feeling in a more chaotic way. With trembling hands, I took the writing box, the unsent letter still sealed inside. I wrapped it carefully in layers of thick cloth, then placed it inside a sturdy metal tin. I drove miles away, deep into a part of the woods far from any path, and buried the tin beneath the roots of an old, gnarled oak tree. Back at the cottage, the oppressive weight began to lift almost immediately. The phantom weeping ceased. The air felt lighter, cleaner. When I spoke to Maya a few days later, she sounded more like herself, confused but relieved that the inexplicable sadness had faded to a dull echo. But the knowledge remains. I know what that letter contained, not in words, but in feeling. I know that emotions, especially powerful, unresolved ones, can linger, clinging to objects like a psychic residue. And I know how easily that residue spread. Now, I look at heirlooms differently. Old letters, dusty boxes, forgotten trinkets, I wonder what echoes they might carry. I find myself hesitant to touch things steeped in unknown history. Because while I contain that particular sorrow, how many other unsent letters, unspoken regrets, and unexpressed griefs are sitting quietly in attics and forgotten drawers, waiting for a hand to reach out and inadvertently catch their contagious ache. The thought sends a deeper chill down my spine than any ghost story ever could. The midnight line. The fluorescent lights of the 14th floor hummed a low, tired buzz, a sound I usually found comforting during late nights at the office. But not tonight. Tonight, close to midnight, the familiar hum felt like a warning. My desk lamp cast a lonely circle of light on my cluttered workspace, leaving the rest of the open-plan room steeped in shadows that felt deeper than usual. I leaned back, trying to stretch the stiffness from my shoulders. I'd stayed late countless times, wrestling spreadsheets and firing off last-minute emails. Standard stuff. Yet, this particular night felt heavy. Every creak of my chair, every distant rumble from the street below made me jump. I kept glancing towards the vast, dark windows overlooking the empty city, my reflection staring back like a nervous stranger. Around 11:30 p.m., needing a jolt, I made the long walk to the break room at the far end of the hall. The corridor lights flickered overhead, and my footsteps echoed louder than normal in the profound silence. The coffee tasted stale, bitter, but I drank it anyway, hoping it would keep the growing unease at bay. Back at my desk, I tried to focus. Spreadsheets blurred. My eyes kept darting to the clock on my monitor, 11:51 p.m. The air felt colder, the small space heater under my desk doing nothing. I rubbed my hands together, feeling a prickle of anxiety I couldn't shake. It felt like waiting for something. Then, it happened. Ahring. The sound shattered the silence, harsh and metallic. It wasn't my computer, not my cell. It was the old desk phone sitting near the edge of my workspace, a relic from years ago, gathering dust. My heart leaped into my throat. That phone wasn't connected. We'd switched to VoIP and cell phones ages ago. Management had decommissioned those old lines. It rang again, insistent, echoing through the empty cubicles. My breath hitched. Part of me screamed to ignore it, to grab my bag and run. But another part, a cold, morbid curiosity, took hold. My feet moved before I consciously decided, carrying me slowly back to the desk. My hand trembled as I reached out and lifted the receiver. "Hello." My voice was a shaky whisper. Silence at first, just a faint crackle of static. Then, breathing. Heavy, slow, uneven breathing, right in my ear. It sounded impossibly close, intimate, like someone standing right beside me. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Just the sound of that slow, ragged breath filling the receiver, filling the quiet room. No words, just presence. Then, a sharp click. The line went dead. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I stood frozen, the cold plastic receiver pressed hard against my ear, my knuckles white. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Slowly, carefully, I placed the phone back in its cradle. It felt unnaturally heavy. I spun around, scanning the shadowy corners, the gaps between cubicles. Nothing. Just the hum of the lights, the glow of my monitor. I rushed to the phone again, checking the cord. It was plugged into the wall jack, just like it always had been. But I knew that jack was dead. I'd seen the IT reports, those lines were cut off at the server level over a year ago. A prank call. Impossible on a dead line. A system glitch. How could a disconnected phone even ring? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but finding none. The feeling of being watched intensified. I wasn't alone here. I grabbed my jacket and my bag, stuffing things in haphazardly. Forget the reports. I needed to leave. Now. As I powered down my computer, I heard a soft scraping sound from somewhere behind me, near the window. I whipped around. Empty. Just the city lights glittering coldly in the distance. Was it just my nerves? I didn't wait to find out. I practically ran to the main elevators, the new ones, jabbing the button repeatedly. Waiting for the car felt like an eternity. Inside, the doors slid shut, and I leaned against the cool metal wall, gasping. My reflection showed a pale, wide-eyed face. Buzz. My cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I fumbled it out. Unknown number. My stomach plummeted. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello. Silence. Then, a single, soft exhale, right into the microphone. Before I could scream or hang up, the call ended. The elevator doors dinged open onto the deserted lobby. The security desk was empty. I didn't care. I pushed through the main doors into the cold night air and sprinted to my car, locking the doors the second I got inside. I drove home faster than I ever had, checking my rearview mirror constantly, half expecting to see those long, thin fingers pressed against my back window, or to hear that breathing beside me in the passenger seat. Back in my apartment, I turned on every light, double-locked the door, and checked the windows. My phone lay on the coffee table, silent. But the fear lingered, cold and heavy in my chest. I went back to the office the next day, arriving late, needing the daylight and the presence of my colleagues. The old phone sat on my desk, inert, dusty. I told a coworker what happened. They laughed, patted my shoulder, and reminded me the phone was dead. Stress gets to you, man, they said. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was stress, exhaustion, a freak electrical surge. But I know what I heard. The breathing. The click. The impossible call on a deadline, and then again on my cell. I don't stay late anymore. Ever. I finish my work from home if needed. That old desk phone. It's buried under a pile of files now. I don't look at it. But sometimes, when the office gets quiet, even during the day, I think I hear it. A faint, distant ring. Or maybe it's just the echo of breathing in a silent room. And I can't shake the feeling, even now, that someone, or something, is still on the line, just waiting for me to pick up again. The floor above. It started subtly, as these things often do. A faint scraping noise from the apartment directly above mine. I live on the third floor of an older, slightly creaky building. Noises are part of the package. At first, I figured it was Mrs. Henderson packing up. She was moving out, leaving the unit vacant until the landlord found a new tenant. Just boxes, I told myself, turning up my TV. A week after she left, the scraping stopped. Silence settled in from upstairs, the kind of quiet that only an empty apartment has. It was peaceful, for a while. Then, about 2 weeks later, I heard footsteps. It was late, maybe 1 a.m. Just a few steps, hesitant, like someone pacing across the wooden floor above. My blood ran cold. I froze, listening intently. Silence returned. Settling noises, I reasoned, my heart thudding. Old building. But the steps had sounded too distinct, too human. The next night, it happened again. Footsteps, maybe 5 or 6 this time, directly over my living room. Then, a soft thud, like something small had been dropped. I muted my TV again, straining to hear. Nothing more. I called my landlord the next morning. Just confirming Unit 4B is still vacant. Yep, he said, sounding busy. Completely empty. Haven't even shown it yet. Why? Oh, just thought I heard something last night. Must have been pipes, I lied, feeling foolish. But it wasn't pipes. The footsteps became a nightly occurrence, always between 1 and 3 a.m. Sometimes pacing, sometimes shuffling. Always stopping if I made a noise, if I coughed, shifted on the couch, or turned up the volume. It felt like whatever was up there was listening. One night, feeling bold, or maybe just sleep-deprived and angry, I grabbed a broom and thumped the ceiling hard, right where the footsteps sounded loudest. Thump, thump, thump. Silence. For a full minute, blissful silence. I almost relaxed. Then, from directly above where I'd hit, came 3 slow, deliberate thuds in reply. Thump, thump, thump. My breath caught. The broom handle suddenly felt ice-cold in my hands. It wasn't random noise. It was answering me. The fear started to consume me. I stopped sleeping properly. Every creak in my own apartment made me jump. I started leaving the radio on low all night, desperate to drown out the sounds from above. It didn't work. I'd still hear them, faint footsteps weaving between the music, a soft drag like furniture being moved inches at a time. I tried recording it on my phone. I left it running all night on my bedside table. In the morning, I listened back, scrolling through hours of my own breathing and the low radio hum. And there it was, faint, but undeniable. The soft tread of footsteps on wood. But when I tried to play it for my sister over the phone, she just heard static. Sounds like interference, maybe your phone's mic is dusty. I became obsessed. During the day, the silence from 4B felt menacing. I knew it was empty, gutted, waiting for renovation. No furniture, no boxes, no Mrs. Henderson. Just bare floors and naked walls. Yet, night after night, the activity continued. The worst incident happened last Tuesday. I woke up suddenly around 2:30 a.m., not sure why. The apartment was dead quiet. No footsteps, no scraping. Just an oppressive silence. I lay there, rigid, waiting. Then, I felt it more than heard it, a low, rhythmic thump-thump from the ceiling above my bed. It was slow, steady. Thump thump, thump thump. It took me a few seconds, my mind foggy with sleep, to realize what it sounded like. It sounded exactly like a heartbeat. A slow, heavy heartbeat pulsing through the floorboards above me. Panic seized me. I scrambled out of bed, flicking on the lamp, my own heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The thumping stopped the instant the light came on. I stood there, trembling in the middle of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The silence that followed was terrifying. It wasn't just mimicking footsteps anymore. It was mimicking life itself. I haven't slept in my bedroom since. I crash on the couch, the TV on, lights blazing in the kitchen and hallway. I still hear it sometimes, a footstep, a scrape. But I haven't heard the heartbeat again, thank God. I put in my notice with the landlord yesterday. Didn't give a reason, just said I was moving. He didn't ask questions. I can't stay here. I feel like that empty space above me is aware. Like it's waiting, listening, learning. Sometimes I wonder what the next tenant will hear. Will it start with just footsteps for them, too? Or will it pick up right where it left off, with that slow, impossible heartbeat echoing from the bare, empty floor above? I just know I need to get out before I find out what comes next. The thought makes my skin crawl even now, sitting here in the bright light of day. Smile. It was just an old photograph, tucked away in a dusty box in my grandmother's attic. Black and white, slightly faded, showing a family gathering from decades ago, people in stiff clothes, standing on a lawn. I barely recognized anyone except my grandmother as a young woman. I decided to keep it, a piece of history, and propped it up on my bookshelf back home. That's when I first noticed him. A man standing near the back, slightly out of focus. Gaunt face, dark suit, and a neutral, almost stern expression. Just another face in the crowd. A few days later, glancing at the photo as I passed, I paused. Did that man in the back smile? It wasn't obvious, just a faint upturn at the corners of his mouth. Huh, I thought, leaning closer. Must have misremembered his expression. I shrugged it off. Memory plays tricks. The next evening, I was tidying up, dusting the bookshelf. My eyes landed on the photo again. The man's mouth was definitely curved upwards now. Not a big grin, but a clear, distinct smile. It looked odd. Out of place with his stiff posture and the formal setting. A chill, faint but definite, traced its way down my spine. Weird lighting, I mumbled, adjusting the angle of the photo. But it wasn't the lighting. Over the next week, the smile grew. Every time I looked, it seemed a fraction wider, more pronounced. It started to look less like a smile and more like a grimace, stretched unnaturally tight across his gaunt face. The creepiest part. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes remained dark, neutral, almost vacant, fixed straight ahead, while the smile beneath them widened day by day. I started feeling watched. Sitting on my couch, reading, I'd get the prickly sensation on the back of my neck. My gaze would inevitably drift to the bookshelf, to the photo, to him. His smile seemed fixed on me now, a silent, unnerving greeting from the past. I tried turning the photo face down. But the feeling of being watched persisted, stronger even. I couldn't stand it. After an hour, trembling slightly, I turned it back around. The smile seemed wider than ever, almost splitting his face. It looked like a drawn-on caricature, sharp and unsettling. Sleep became difficult. I'd close my eyes and see that fixed, widening smile. I started avoiding the living room after dark. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know if I was losing my mind. I took my phone, opened the camera, and focused on the photograph, zooming in on the man. On my phone screen, his expression was neutral. Stern, even. Exactly as I first remembered it. My blood turned to ice. I lowered the phone, looking directly at the physical photograph on the shelf. The wide, grotesque smile was still there, clear as day. It wasn't my eyes. It wasn't the light. The camera couldn't see it. Only I could. Panic set in. I snatched the photo off the shelf. The old paper felt cold in my hand. I stared at the smiling man, his dark eyes seeming to bore into mine. The smile was wider now than humanly possible, a stretched rictus of black and white horror. I felt a visceral urge to destroy it. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a lighter, and took the photo out to the small concrete balcony. My hands shook violently as I held the flame to the corner. The old paper caught quickly, curling inwards, turning black. The man's smiling face distorted in the heat, seeming to leer at me one last time before being consumed by the fire. I watched until it was nothing but gray ash, scattering in the night breeze. Relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. It was gone. Done. I went back inside, locking the balcony door, my heart still pounding but the oppressive weight lifted. I took a deep breath, the first easy one in days. I decided to take a quick selfie to send to a friend, proof that I was okay, that the craziness was over. I raised my phone, switched to the front-facing camera, and smiled weakly. And froze. Reflected on the dark screen of my phone, right behind my own shoulder, was the man from the photograph. He wasn't stern or neutral. He was smiling. Wide. Unnatural. And this time, his dark eyes were looking directly at me. The follower. It started on the commute home. Just a feeling, really. Standing on the packed evening train, swaying with the rhythm, I got that distinct prickle on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I scanned the tired faces around me, but everyone was lost in their phones or staring blankly ahead. I shook it off. Big city, crowded train, perfectly normal. But as I looked at my reflection in the dark train window, I saw him. Just for a split second. Standing behind me in the reflection, a tall, thin man in a slightly dated suit, his face obscured by shadow and the glare. I turned quickly. Nobody there matched the image. Just commuters shuffling, getting ready for their stops. My heart gave a nervous jump. Weird reflection, I muttered, turning back to the window. The reflected crowd looked normal again. The feeling didn't leave when I got off the train. Walking the few blocks home, I felt eyes on my back. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but the sidewalk held only the usual stragglers heading home. Still, the sensation persisted, like a static charge in the air. Passing a shop window, I caught a glimpse in the periphery, that same tall, thin silhouette reflected beside mine, vanishing the moment I focused on it. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, leaning against it for a moment, letting out a breath. Safe. Home. The feeling should have dissipated, but it lingered. As I walked through my living room, I felt a flicker of movement near the darkened window. I spun around. Nothing but the city lights outside painting faint patterns on the glass. That night, sleep was elusive. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, seemed amplified. I kept thinking about the reflection on the train, the shape in the shop window. Was I just stressed? Overtired? The next day, the feeling was back the moment I stepped outside. On the train, walking to work, even sitting at my desk, that persistent sense of being observed by unseen eyes. I started noticing shadows in the corners of my vision, both at work and at home. They always vanished when I looked directly at them, skittering away like startled insects. Then, things escalated subtly. I'd be washing dishes, glance at the dark reflection in the kitchen window, and see a tall shape standing behind me for a fraction of a second before it resolved back into the familiar reflection of my own kitchen. I'd be watching TV, and the dark screen during a scene change would show not just my reflection, but a thin figure standing silently in the corner of the reflected room, gone when the show returned. I started avoiding reflections. I kept lights on, even during the day. I closed curtains. But the feeling didn't need reflections. I felt it. Sometimes, I'd walk into a room and the air would feel suddenly cold, heavy, charged with that watching presence. One evening, I was getting ready for bed, standing in front of the bathroom mirror. I splashed water on my face, eyes closed. When I opened them, he was there. In the mirror. Standing right behind my reflection. Tall, thin, face still indistinct, shrouded in a shadow the bathroom light couldn't pierce. He wasn't moving. Just watching my reflection. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Pure, paralyzing terror froze me to the spot. My own reflection stared back, eyes wide with horror, but the figure behind it remained still, impassive. I could see the slightly too long fingers of its hand resting on my reflected shoulder. Slowly, fighting every instinct screaming at me to run, I turned around. The bathroom was empty. Small, tiled, brightly lit. No shadows, no cold spots. Just me, alone, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection stared back, alone. The figure was gone. But I knew it wasn't gone. It was just unseen. It's been weeks now. The feeling never leaves for long. The peripheral shadows are bolder, lingering longer before darting away. Sometimes, when I'm walking, I hear an extra footstep falling just slightly out of sync with my own, stopping the instant I stop to listen. I don't look in mirrors much anymore. I don't look at dark windows. Because sometimes, I see him. Not just in reflection, but peripherally, a tall darkness leaning in a doorway just out of sight, a thin hand disappearing around a corner. I haven't told anyone. How could I? What would I say? That I'm being followed by something only I can see, something that lives in reflections and shadows? The worst part is the silence. It doesn't speak, it doesn't touch, not yet, anyway, it just watches. And I feel it, always. Just behind me. Just out of sight. Waiting. I don't know what it wants, but the constant, silent observation is stretching my sanity thin. It feels like it's getting closer, learning me. And I have nowhere to run, because wherever I go, the follower is already there, reflected in my eyes. The frames on the wall. I've always been meticulous about my apartment. Not obsessively clean, but ordered. Especially the gallery wall in my living room, a collection of photos marking trips, family moments, and milestones, all hung in perfectly straight lines. It was my little point of pride. So when I came home after a weekend visiting my parents and found 3 frames askew, my stomach lurched. It wasn't just crooked. One, a landscape from a hiking trip, was completely upside down. Another, a picture of my college friends, was tilted at a bizarre angle. But the one that sent a genuine wave of cold dread through me was the photo of my grandparents on their wedding day. It's an old black and white, precious to me, usually centered on the wall. It was turned completely backward, the plain cardboard backing facing out into the room. My first thought, naturally, was a break-in. But the door had been double-locked. I checked the windows, all secured from the inside. Nothing else was disturbed. My laptop sat on the desk, mail was untouched on the counter, nothing seemed missing. It was only the frames. I carefully righted them, my heart hammering against my ribs. I told myself it must have been a tremor, maybe vibrations from construction nearby, even though that felt flimsy. The way the grandparent photo was reversed, that didn't seem accidental. I pushed the thought away, chalked it up to travel fatigue, and tried to settle back into my routine. 3 weeks later, I went on a short work trip. 2 nights away. When I returned on Sunday evening, the cold dread hit me the second I stepped into the living room. It had happened again. This time, only 2 frames were disturbed. The upside-down landscape was fine. But the photo of my college friends was tilted again, and my grandparents' wedding picture was once more facing the wall. Again, the locks were secure. No sign of entry. Nothing else touched. This time, the unease curdled into something closer to fear. Someone, or something, was getting in. But how? And why just move the pictures? Why those pictures? I decided I needed proof, or at least an explanation. I dug out an old webcam, propped it on the bookshelf opposite the gallery wall, angled it just right, and connected it to my laptop. Before my next weekend trip to my parents', I hit record, leaving the laptop running. Returning Sunday night, my breath hitched as I walked in. The grandparent photo was reversed. Again. My hands trembled as I sat down at my desk and opened the video file. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, the empty, still room, sunlight shifting, then dusk falling. Nothing. Then, around 3:14 a.m. Saturday morning, the video feed flickered. Just a split second of static, like a digital hiccup. Before the flicker, the frame was normal. Immediately after, it was reversed. There was no hand. No shadow. No figure crossing the room. The frame simply changed in that instant of visual noise. I watched it again and again. The glitch was so fast, almost imperceptible. But it was there. And it coincided exactly with the frame turning. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a draft. It wasn't faulty hanging wire. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building sounded like footsteps. I kept picturing that flicker, the impossible change. The next morning, feeling ragged, I took down all the frames. My wall looked bare and sad, but I couldn't stand looking at them anymore. I carefully stacked them in a sturdy cardboard box, placing the grandparent photo near the bottom, face down, burying it under the others. I slid the box into the corner of the living room, behind an armchair. Out of sight, hopefully out of mind. For a few days, there was peace. The bare wall was unsettling, but the oppressive feeling lessened. I started to think maybe removing them had broken whatever cycle this was. Then came Thursday morning. I woke up, made coffee, and walked into the living room. The box was still behind the armchair. Nothing looked disturbed. But something made me check. I pulled the box out, my heart starting its familiar frantic rhythm. I lifted the top few frames. There it was. Sitting right on top of the stack, perfectly centered, was my grandparents' wedding photo. Face up. It hadn't just been turned. It had been taken from the bottom of the stack and placed deliberately on top, inside a closed box, in a locked apartment. I haven't put the frames back up. The box is now taped shut and shoved deep in my bedroom closet. I haven't taken another overnight trip. I check the closet every morning, half expecting the tape to be broken, the photo somehow displayed. So far, it hasn't been. But I don't feel safe. I don't know what moved those pictures or how. I don't know why it focused on my family, especially my grandparents. All I know is that something unseen, something impossible, shared my apartment. And the most terrifying part? I have no idea if it's still here, waiting. Sometimes, late at night, when the building is quiet, I think I feel a cold spot near the living room wall where the pictures used to hang. And I wonder what I'll find when I wake up tomorrow. The midnight swing. I run at night. Always have. There's a peace to the empty streets after midnight, just the sound of my own breathing and my feet hitting the pavement. My usual route takes me past the old municipal playground on Willow Creek Road. It's been shut down for years, gates locked with a thick, rusty chain, the equipment slowly surrendering to weeds and weather. About 6 months ago, I started hearing it. As I got close to the chain-link fence surrounding the park, a faint but distinct sound would cut through the quiet, squeak, squeak, squeak. Like one of the old swings was moving. The first few times, I dismissed it. Wind, maybe. An animal. But the sound was too steady, too rhythmic. And some nights, the air was completely still. Curiosity, mixed with a growing unease, made me slow down one night. The park is poorly lit, just one flickering street lamp casting long, dancing shadows. I peered through the fence. And I saw it. One of the swings, the one furthest from the gate, half hidden by an overgrown bush, was moving. Gently, steadily, back and forth. Like someone was sitting there, pushing off lightly. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the darkness inside the fence. Nothing. No figures, no movement other than that solitary swing. It continued its hypnotic rhythm, squeak, squeak, squeak. I told myself it had to be the wind catching it just right. But deep down, it didn't feel right. I finished my run that night feeling watched, glancing over my shoulder more than usual. It became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes the squeaking was louder, the swing moving higher. Other times, it was barely a whisper, a slight rock. Every time I approached that corner, my stomach would tighten. I started timing my runs to pass it around the same time, maybe 12:45 a.m. I felt compelled to look. One particularly still, moonless night, I decided I needed a closer look. The squeaking was loud, almost insistent. I walked right up to the fence, gripping the cold metal links. My breath plumed in the chilly air. The swing was moving energetically now, arcing back and forth in the gloom. And for the first time, I thought I saw something. A shape. Indistinct, darker than the surrounding shadows, sitting on the swing seat. It wasn't solid, more like a smudge or a distortion in the air, but it had the vague outline of a seated figure, maybe small, hunched forward. I froze. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The rhythmic squeaking felt like it was inside my head. I wanted to call out, but my throat was too dry. Then, as if sensing my stare, the squeaking abruptly stopped. The swing slowed rapidly, coming to a jerky halt. And the shape, it was just gone. Vanished between one swing and the next. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back from the fence, nearly tripping, and broke into a sprint. I didn't stop running until I was inside my apartment, door locked, leaning against it, gasping for air. I tried changing my route after that. Took different streets, added extra miles just to avoid Willow Creek Road. But the memory haunted me. The moving swing, the rhythmic squeak, the shape. About a month later, curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I had to know. I went back, deliberately, walking this time, arriving just before 1 a.m. The night was quiet. I stood across the street, watching the playground. For 10 minutes, nothing. The swings hung perfectly still. Relief warred with disappointment. Maybe it had stopped. Maybe I had imagined it. Then, it started. Squeak. Faintly at first. Squeak. A little louder. I looked. The same swing began its slow, steady arc. No shape this time, just the swing itself moving in the darkness. I didn't approach the fence. I just stood there, watching it sway back and forth under the flickering street lamp, listening to that lonely, repetitive sound. It felt deliberate. Like it was performing just for me. After a few minutes, I turned and walked away, the rhythmic squeaking following me until I turned the corner. I don't run past the Willow Creek playground anymore. Sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I think about taking that route, just to see. But I never do. Some things are better left unknown. I don't know what makes that swing move or what that shape was. I just know that it felt old, and lonely, and not quite right. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and the wind whistles outside, I think I can almost hear it, a faint, rhythmic squeak, squeak, squeak. And I make sure my doors are locked. The wrong sister. My younger sister, Maya, lives 3 states away. We talk on the phone maybe twice a week, FaceTime on Sundays. She's bubbly, always moving, gestures wildly when she talks. That's why seeing her standing perfectly still in my kitchen last Tuesday afternoon felt so jarringly wrong. I'd just gotten home from work, dropped my bag by the door, and headed towards the fridge. And there she was, by the counter, back mostly to me, looking down at something. Same dark, curly hair she always complains about, same favorite faded green hoodie she practically lives in. Maya? I said, confused. What are you doing here? You didn't say you were coming. She didn't turn around. Didn't respond. Just stayed frozen, head slightly bowed. A weird prickle went up the back of my neck. The way she stood was too still. Maya never stands that still. Hey. I took a step closer. The figure slowly lifted its head, but didn't turn. From the side, I saw her profile. It was Maya's face, but her expression was completely blank. Vacant. Like a mannequin. Her eyes were open but seemed to be looking at nothing. My stomach twisted. This wasn't right. It felt profoundly wrong. Maya, are you okay? My voice trembled slightly. Before she could move or answer, if she was going to, my phone buzzed loudly in my pocket. The sudden noise made me jump. I fumbled for it, glancing down for just a second. The caller ID read, Maya. My blood ran cold. I looked up instantly. The kitchen was empty. The figure was gone. There was no sound of footsteps, no door closing. Just empty space where she had been standing moments before. Shaking, I answered the phone. Hello. Hey. What's up? It was Maya's real voice, bright, energetic, a million miles away from the vacant stare I'd just seen. Just calling on my lunch break. How's your day going? My throat felt tight. Maya, where are you right now? At work? Like always on a Tuesday, she laughed. Why? You sound weird. I couldn't tell her. How could I? I just saw someone who looks exactly like you standing silently in my kitchen, but it wasn't you. I mumbled something about being tired, asked about her day, and hung up as quickly as possible. I searched my apartment. Checked the closets, under the bed, even the small balcony. Nothing. The doors were locked, windows shut tight. I tried to rationalize it. Extreme fatigue. A waking dream. A hallucination. But it had felt so real. The stillness, the blankness, that's what chilled me to the bone. Life went on, but the image was seared into my mind. I became jumpy. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow in my peripheral vision made my heart leap. I started double-checking the locks constantly. About a week later, it happened again. I was walking home from the grocery store, about a block from my apartment building. Across the street, standing under a tree and looking vaguely in my direction, was Maya. Same green hoodie, same vacant look. She wasn't moving, just standing there. My grocery bags slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, cans rolling onto the sidewalk. I stared, frozen. It was broad daylight. Other people were walking past, none seeming to notice her, or perhaps just seeing a young woman standing under a tree. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone and immediately FaceTimed Maya. Her face popped up on my screen, smiling, sitting clearly in her office cubicle miles away, a poster visible behind her. Hey. 2 calls in one day? She asked, raising an eyebrow. My eyes darted between my phone screen, the real, vibrant Maya, and the figure across the street. The figure hadn't moved. It still had that unnerving stillness, that empty gaze fixed somewhere near me. Sorry, I stammered, keeping my voice low. Just wanted to see your face. As I watched the figure across the street through my phone screen showing the real Maya, the figure slowly turned its head and looked directly at me. Its eyes were dark, empty pits. It didn't smile. It didn't frown. It just looked. A wave of pure terror washed over me. I ended the call abruptly, grabbed my spilled groceries, and practically ran the rest of the way home, not daring to look back. I haven't seen the Maya figure since then. It's been a few weeks. But I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I feel jumpy in my own home. Sometimes I think I see a flash of a green hoodie out of the corner of my eye, or catch a glimpse of dark curly hair in a window reflection, but there's never anyone there when I look properly. I haven't told Maya. I haven't told anyone else. How do you explain seeing a perfect, silent, wrong copy of someone you love? It sounds like madness. But I know what I saw. It wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It wasn't threatening, not directly. But its presence, its sheer wrongness, was more terrifying than any scream or chain rattling. It was the familiar made utterly alien. Now, when Maya calls, I listen extra closely to her voice, searching for that telltale energy. When we FaceTime, I study her expression, needing to see her laugh or frown. Because somewhere, maybe nearby, maybe just in my head, there's the other one. The silent one. The one with the empty eyes. And the thought that I might see her again, standing perfectly still, just watching, that's a fear that keeps me awake long after the city outside has gone quiet. The clock reads 3:17. It's just a standard digital alarm clock. Black plastic casing, red LED numbers, the kind you can buy anywhere for $10. I've had it on my nightstand for years. It does its job, tells the time, wakes me up for work. Until about a month ago. The first time it happened, I thought I was dreaming. I woke up abruptly, heart pounding, with that disoriented feeling you get when pulled from deep sleep. I glanced at the clock, expecting to see the usual late-night hour. Instead of numbers, the display glowed with a single word. Awake. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. It was still there. Just awake in those stark red letters. It felt wrong. Like the clock wasn't supposed to be able to do that. Then, as I watched, it flickered and changed back to the normal time, 3:17 a.m. Weird dream, I told myself. Faulty wiring maybe. I rolled over, unnerved but eventually drifted back to sleep. 2 nights later, it happened again. Same sudden jolt awake. Same pounding heart. I looked at the clock, almost dreading it. This time, it read. Look up. My breath hitched. Against my better judgment, compelled by the command, my eyes slowly scanned the ceiling above my bed. Just the familiar textured plaster, shadows pooling in the corners. Nothing. When I looked back down, the clock showed 3:17 a.m. That's when the real fear started creeping in. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't a simple glitch. It happened again the following night, and the night after that. Always at exactly 3:17 a.m. The messages varied. Near. Listen. 7 steps. Each time, I'd be ripped from sleep, see the glowing red word or phrase, feel a wave of cold dread wash over me, check my surroundings finding nothing, and then watch it revert to 3:17 a.m. before eventually showing 3:18 a.m. I tried unplugging it. The first night it was unplugged, I slept soundly, relieved. But the next night, I woke up anyway at 3:17 a.m., a habit now ingrained. I glanced at the blank, dark screen of the unplugged clock, and faintly, almost impossibly, I could see the ghost of red letters behind the dark plastic. I couldn't make out the word, it was too faint, like an afterimage burned into the display. I plugged it back in immediately, my hands shaking. Having it dark felt worse, somehow. I tried setting my phone to record video of the clock all night. When I checked the footage, the clock displayed the normal time right up until 3:16 a.m. Then, at the exact moment it should have turned to 3:17 a.m., the video feed would get staticky for a split second, just a line of visual noise, and then show 3:17 a.m. The message itself was never captured, as if the recording skipped over it. The messages became more unsettling. Behind you, I spun around in bed so fast I nearly fell off, finding only my bedroom wall. Don't move, I lay paralyzed with fear for what felt like an hour, muscles aching. It watches. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I started dreading the night. I'd lie awake, staring at the clock as 3:16 a.m. approached, my body tense, waiting for the jolt, waiting for the message. The lines were pale, barely visible against my skin, but they were undeniably there. Perfectly formed, chillingly intricate. A strangled cry escaped my lips. I scrambled out of bed, stumbling towards the bathroom, desperate to wash it off. But I stopped dead in the hallway, my blood running cold. I didn't need the mirror to know. I could feel it. The slight pressure, the faint buzzing, the awareness of that intricate, wrong geometry pressed against my skin. I didn't wash it off. How could I? It wasn't on my skin, it felt like it was part of it. Today, the internet feels quieter about the pattern. Some of the original posts are gone. The merchandise links are broken. It's like someone is trying to scrub it away. But for those of us who saw it, who really saw it, it's too late. I see the pattern everywhere now, not as a coincidence, but as a fundamental structure peeking through the cracks of the world. Sometimes the lines pulse. Sometimes objects subtly shift to match its form. And the faint imprint on my arm remains, a constant, terrifying reminder. It went viral. It spread. And now, it's integrating. We invited the pattern in, mesmerized by its strangeness, and now we can't get it out. It's in the frost, in the wood grain, in the scattered papers, and now, it's on me. And I have no idea what happens next, when the pattern decides to become more than just lines on skin. The Whisper Stone. It started with the calm stones. They appeared seemingly out of nowhere, flooding online marketplaces and popping up in influencer unboxing videos. They were small, smooth, oddly weighted stones, usually a muted gray or soft blue, made of some unknown, cool-to-the-touch resin. Marketed as the ultimate fidget toy and stress reliever, their appeal was instant. Hashtag calmstone, hashtag pocketzen, hashtag oddly satisfying, the hashtags exploded. Everyone seemed to have one, rolling it between their fingers during meetings, lectures, or just while scrolling through their feeds. My name is Liam. I bought one impulsively from a pop-up ad. It felt nice in my hand, cool and solid, its surface almost unnaturally smooth. It did have a strangely calming effect, focusing my restless energy as I spun it on my desk while working from home. I figured it was just a clever bit of marketing capitalizing on the fidget trend. The quiet started subtly. I live alone in a usually noisy apartment building, traffic outside, neighbors moving around, the hum of the fridge. But one evening, about a week after getting the calm stone, I noticed the ambient sound seemed softer. Muted. I thought maybe my ears were blocked, or I was just tired. I put the stone down on my nightstand and went to bed. That night, I woke up suddenly. The room was utterly silent. Not just quiet, but a heavy, pressing absence of sound. No traffic hum, no heating system clicking, not even the sound of my own breathing seemed to echo normally. It felt like being wrapped in thick cotton. Panic tightened my chest. I sat bolt upright, straining my ears. Nothing. Then, faintly, from the direction of the nightstand, I thought I heard it, a soft, sibilant SH. Like someone whispering, trying to keep a secret. I flicked on the lamp. The calm stone sat innocently on the wood. The whispering, if it had ever been there, was gone. The normal, low-level sounds of the apartment building slowly filtered back in, though they still felt distant. My heart was pounding. Just a weird dream, I told myself, but the unnatural silence had felt chillingly real. Over the next few days, the phenomenon repeated. Periods of unsettling quiet, followed by the perception of a faint, indecipherable whisper seemingly emanating from the stone when the silence was deepest. It wasn't recordable. I tried setting my phone next to it, but the playback revealed only normal room tone, perhaps even quieter than usual. Online, amidst the glowing reviews and pictures of Comstones artfully arranged on desks, similar anecdotes began to surface, buried in comment sections or posted on obscure forums. Anyone else notice things get really quiet when holding their Comstone? Swear I heard my stone whisper last night. Freaked me out. Hashtag Comstone weird. Is it just me or does the silence feel heavy? Like it's pressing in? These posts were often dismissed as imagination, tinnitus, or people being suggestible. The company behind Comstones issued a generic statement about the stones being made of inert, sound-dampening resin, intended to enhance focus. But the effect intensified for me. The periods of silence grew longer, sometimes lasting minutes. During these times, the whispers became slightly more defined, though never forming actual words. It sounded like hushed breaths, tiny clicks, the rustle of dry leaves, all layered together into something that felt intentional but incomprehensible. I started feeling a strange anxiety during the silence, like I was missing something important, like the world outside the bubble of quiet was moving on without me. I tried putting the stone in a drawer, but found myself unconsciously reaching for it, needing that smooth, cool weight in my hand. Leaving it behind felt wrong. The silence seemed even more profound when the stone wasn't near, as if its absence amplified the effect before the whispers began. One afternoon, I was on a video call with my team. Mid-sentence, my colleague Sarah froze, her eyes wide. "Liam, I can't hear you anymore," she typed frantically into the chat. The others agreed. They could see my mouth moving on screen, but no sound was coming through. My audio input showed it was working fine. On my end, their voices had become distant, muffled whispers. The Comstone was sitting right next to my laptop. I quickly slid it away, into my pocket. A few seconds later, Sarah gasped, "Okay, you're back." That was so weird. The silence wasn't just in my perception anymore. It was somehow interacting with technology, selectively muting things around the stone. That evening, I decided I'd had enough. The calming effect was long gone, replaced by a gnawing dread. I took the Comstone outside to the communal trash bins behind my building. As I held it over the open lid, the silence descended instantly, heavier than ever before. The usual city evening sounds, distant sirens, chatter from open windows, cars, vanished. And the whispering started, louder this time, swirling around my head, a chorus of unintelligible secrets. It felt cold, ancient, and possessive. My hand trembled. Part of me, terrifyingly, didn't want to let it go. It felt like discarding a piece of myself. But the invasive nature of the silence, the feeling of being listened to by the whispers, finally won. I dropped the stone into the bin. The sound of it clattering against other trash was abruptly, shockingly loud. All the ambient noise of the city rushed back in, almost painfully intense. The whispers stopped cold. Relief washed over me so strongly my knees felt weak. The next day, #ComstoneRecall was trending. The company cited potential auditory side effects and urged immediate disposal. The internet moved on, chasing the next trend. But sometimes, late at night, when the building is quiet, I still experience moments of that heavy, pressing silence. It never lasts long, but it's there. And sometimes, just on the edge of hearing, I think I catch the faintest sibilant sh. I never found out what the Comstones really were, or what the whispers wanted. I just know they spread fast, offered quiet, and tried to take something more in return. And I worry about how many weren't thrown away. The house without locks. I should have known something was wrong from the start. The rent was so low it felt like a typo, a number missing a zero. The landlord, a shifty guy who avoided eye contact, mumbled something about the previous tenants leaving in a hurry. The weirdest part? None of the doors inside or out had locks. Not broken locks, just none. Smooth wood where the mechanism should be. He claimed they used heavy doorstops, giant wedges of wood, and that it was just a quirk of the place. Being a locksmith by trade, I wasn't too worried. Annoyed, maybe, but fixable. I needed a cheap place fast, and the house itself, a small, single-story bungalow with a tired-looking yard, seemed harmless enough. Still, walking through it the first time, it felt hollow. Not just empty, but like the air itself was thin and used up. I noticed scuff marks on the floors and faint scratches on the walls near the doorframes, right where a doorknob might hit if swung open too hard. I brushed it off as wear and tear. My first night, I didn't even unpack much. I went straight to work, installing brand new, high-quality deadbolts on the front door, the back door, my bedroom door, and the kitchen door leading outside. I tested each one meticulously. The satisfying click of the bolts sliding home felt like I was claiming the space, making it secure. Soft scraping or tapping noises from within the walls, sometimes near the floor, sometimes high up near the ceiling. And more footprint-shaped cracks appeared. Near the kitchenette. Along the wall bordering the empty apartment. Near the bathroom door. Sometimes they looked like handprints, fingers splayed. They weren't deep, just these disturbing outlines etched into the surface, accompanied by tiny flakes of paint dust on the floor beneath them. I started feeling watched, constantly on edge. I'd be reading on the couch and hear a soft tap 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 from the corner. I'd be showering and hear a faint scratch from behind the tiles. I tried talking to the landlord again, mentioning the cracks looked like footprints. He brushed me off, blaming humidity and settling. He sounded impatient, eager to end the call. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard rhythmic knocking, soft but deliberate, coming from the wall shared with the vacant unit. Knock, 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 knock. It paused, then repeated. My breath hitched. Was someone in there? A squatter? But the door was locked, the neighbors insisted it was empty. I crept to the wall, flashlight aimed. The footprint cracks seemed to shimmer in the beam, the shadows playing tricks, making them look raised. I reached out, touching one outline. For a split second, I felt a faint vibration under my palm, like a distant tremor, before pulling my hand back as if burned. Panic began to set in. I started leaving lights on, sleeping fitfully on the sofa, my bedroom door open so I could watch the hallway. I considered moving out, but where would I go on such short notice? And how would I explain breaking the lease? My walls have footprints appearing from the inside. One Saturday, determined to get proof, I stayed up, hidden in the dim living room, phone camera ready, facing the wall with the most activity. Midnight brought the hallway footsteps. Then, the scraping inside the wall began, closer this time. I held my breath, flashlight beam fixed on the largest footprint crack near the baseboard. Then I saw it. The plaster around the footprint outline pulsed. It pushed outward, maybe half an inch, the paint flaking, before retracting. It was like something inside the wall was pressing against it, testing the barrier. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The shape pulsed again, a slow, deliberate pressure from within. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, but by the time I aimed the camera, the wall was still. The cracks looked inert, just flaws in old plaster. I haven't slept properly since. The cracks multiply slowly. Sometimes I find fresh paint dust. The scratching and tapping continue, intermittent, unpredictable. It doesn't feel aggressive, not yet. It feels like something, existing, just beyond the thin barrier of the wall. Something moving within the structure of the building itself, leaving its traces like ghostly fossils in the plaster. I walk around my own apartment feeling like I'm sharing it. Every creak, every tap sends my heart racing. I keep my phone close, the number for emergency services ready, but I haven't called. How do you report footprints manifesting in your walls? Right now, it's late. The lights are on. I'm sitting on the edge of my couch, staring at the wall opposite. My skin prickles. I just heard a faint, rhythmic tap, tap, tap from behind the plaster near the floor. It knows I'm listening. It's there. Moving. Waiting. And I'm trapped here, living inches away from whatever leaves its chilling impressions on the other side. The glitch in the glass. It started subtly. So subtly, I thought I was just tired. You know how you catch your reflection in a window or a mirror, just a quick glance. That's all it was. But one evening, walking past the hallway mirror, I stopped. I blinked, but in the glass, my reflection's eyes seemed to close a fraction of a second after mine opened. I shook my head, dismissed it. Too little sleep, too much screen time. But it happened again the next day, in the bathroom mirror. Blink. Pause. Blink. My reflection was lagging, just my eyes. I tested it, waved my hand, tilted my head, everything else was perfectly synchronized. Only the blink was off. It was small, but it burrowed under my skin. Over the next week, it got weirder. Sometimes, I'd glance at my reflection in the darkened TV screen after turning it off, and its head would be tilted slightly, even though I was sitting perfectly straight. Or I'd see its lips parted in a faint O shape in the microwave door glass when my own mouth was firmly closed. Tiny, momentary discrepancies. Easy to ignore, easy to rationalize. Until the smile. I was washing my hands, looking down. When I looked up at the bathroom mirror, I wasn't smiling. My reflection was. Not a huge grin, just a small, knowing curve of the lips that wasn't mine. It lasted only a second before snapping back to match my own shocked expression, but I saw it. My heart hammered against my ribs, cold dread washing over me. I started avoiding mirrors. I covered the one in the hallway with a scarf. I'd turn away from shop windows. I brushed my teeth staring at the sink basin. But it was like knowing there's a spider in the room, even if you can't see it, you feel it. I felt watched, especially near reflective surfaces. One night, I couldn't stand the avoidance anymore. I needed to know if I was losing my mind. I stood in front of the covered hallway mirror, took a deep breath, and pulled the scarf away. My reflection stared back, perfectly normal. Same tired eyes, same tense posture. I waited, holding my breath. Nothing. I let out a shaky sigh of relief, feeling foolish. Then, my reflection slowly, deliberately, raised one hand and waved. My own hands were clenched at my sides. I stumbled back, hitting the opposite wall, my breath catching in my throat. The reflection's expression didn't change, it just held that wave for a second longer before its hand dropped, perfectly mirroring my own motionless stance once more. I didn't cover the mirror again. What was the point? It knew I knew. Now, every reflection is a source of low-level panic. Is it just me in the glass? Or is it the other me, the one that lags, the one that smiles, the one that waves? Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I think I hear a faint whisper, like dry leaves skittering across glass. It almost sounds like my name. I don't know what it wants, or why it chose me. I just know that sometimes, when I look in the mirror, it feels like I'm not the only one looking back. And I'm starting to wonder, which one of us is the real reflection? The pattern on the ceiling. It started with a single, faint crack above my bed. Just a hairline fracture in the old plaster. I live in an older apartment building, so I figured it was just the place settling. I didn't think much of it for the first few days. Then, I noticed another small crack branching off from the first. And a day later, another. They weren't spreading randomly, they seemed to be forming a sort of jagged line, heading towards the center of the ceiling. Still, I told myself it was just old plaster doing what old plaster does. The feeling that something was wrong began about a week later. I was lying in bed, reading before turning off the light, when I glanced up. The pattern of cracks looked different. Sharper, somehow. More deliberate. It wasn't just random lines anymore, it was starting to look like interconnected angles, almost geometric, but with no symmetry I could recognize. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I got out of bed and stood on a chair to get a closer look, tracing the lines with my finger. The plaster felt solid, cold. That night, I heard it for the first time, a faint, dry scraping sound. It seemed to come from the ceiling, right above where the pattern was. It was soft, like sandpaper on wood, and intermittent. I turned my light back on, heart pounding, but the ceiling looked exactly the same. The sound stopped. Over the next few days, the pattern grew. More tiny cracks appeared, connecting to the main shape, making it more complex. It didn't look like any symbol I knew. It looked like something ancient and wrong. And the scraping sound returned each night, always soft, always stopping the moment I focused light or attention directly on the ceiling. I started losing sleep. I'd lie awake, staring into the darkness above, imagining those cracks spreading, imagining what was making that sound just inches above my head. I tried sleeping on the couch, but the thought of what might be happening to my bedroom ceiling while I wasn't there kept pulling me back. One morning, I woke up with a gasp. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the ceiling clearly. The pattern had changed drastically overnight. It was larger, more intricate, and in the center, where the lines converged, there was something new. It looked disturbingly like footprints. Tiny, oddly shaped footprints etched into the plaster, leading out from the central point and trailing towards the wall. My breath hitched. I scrambled out of bed, feeling dizzy. Footprints. On my ceiling. They weren't deep, just faint outlines, but they were undeniably there. And the scraping sound from the night before suddenly felt terrifyingly purposeful. I called my landlord. I tried to sound calm, just mentioning some unusual cracks appearing rapidly. He sent a maintenance guy over who glanced up, shrugged, said it was probably water damage from the apartment above, even though there were no stains, patched the most obvious cracks with some spackle, and left. That night, the scraping was louder. And when I woke the next morning, the spackle was gone, flaked onto my floor like dry snow. The footprints were back, clearer than before, and there were more of them, trailing further across the ceiling. Now, I sleep with the lights on. It doesn't stop the scraping. It doesn't stop the pattern from changing almost imperceptibly each day. Sometimes, I feel like I'm being watched from above. When I lie very still, I can almost feel a pressure, a weight, concentrating on the ceiling directly over my bed. I don't know what the pattern means or what's making the footprints. I don't know what's scraping just beyond the plaster. All I know is that every night, I lie awake staring up at it, feeling the cold dread seep into my bones, wondering when those tiny footprints will reach the wall, and start coming down. The static on the line. It started about 2 weeks ago. My landline phone rang, which is weird enough, who even calls landlines anymore? I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer or maybe a wrong number. Hello. Silence. Not complete silence, though. There was a low, fuzzy static on the line. Like listening through water, or the sound an old TV channel used to make when it went off the air. Hello. I repeated, louder. Just the static. It felt thick. Heavy. After a few more seconds, I hung up, figuring it was just a bad connection or a pocket dial from somewhere. But it rang again the next evening. Same time, almost to the minute. I answered. Same heavy, fuzzy static. No voice, no clicks, just that oppressive sound. This time, I stayed on the line longer, maybe 30 seconds, listening intently. There was nothing within the static, but the static itself felt wrong. Like it was intentional. I hung up again, a little prickle of unease on my neck. It became a daily occurrence. Every evening, between 7:15 and 7:20 p.m., the landline would ring. Always, unknown caller, on the ID. Always that same, thick static. I started letting it go to the answering machine, but it never left a message. The machine would just record 30 seconds of that dense static before cutting off. Deleting those messages felt strange. It wasn't just noise, listening to the playback gave me a headache, a dull pressure behind my eyes. I tried unplugging the phone for a few nights. Peace. But the silence felt wrong too, like I was just delaying it. When I plugged it back in a few days later, it rang that evening, right on schedule. Static. Then, things shifted slightly. One night, I was cooking dinner when it rang. I ignored it. But as I moved around the kitchen, chopping vegetables, I felt like the static on the unheard line was following my movements. It's impossible, I know. But the feeling was intense, like whatever was generating that sound was somehow aware of me, tracking me through the walls. My hand slipped with the knife, nearly cutting my finger. I stopped answering. I stopped listening to the messages. But I couldn't stop knowing it was happening. That specific time slot every evening became filled with dread. My shoulders would tense up around 7 p.m. I'd find myself holding my breath, waiting for the ring that inevitably came. Last night was different. I was tired of the dread, tired of the waiting. When it rang at 7:17 p.m., I snatched the receiver. "What do you want?" I didn't shout, but my voice was tight. The static pulsed. Just once. It got slightly louder, sharper, for less than a second, then settled back into its thick, fuzzy drone. It was a reaction. It heard me. I slammed the phone down, my hand shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. It wasn't just a bad connection. It wasn't random. Something, somewhere, was deliberately sending this sound to my phone every single night. It was listening. It had reacted. The phone is sitting across the room now. It's almost 7 p.m. The silence in my apartment feels heavy, charged. I keep glancing at the phone, imagining the wires humming, imagining that thick static gathering somewhere, waiting to pour through the line. Waiting for 7:15. I don't know what happens if I don't hang up. I don't know what it is. I just know it calls every night, and the sound it makes isn't empty. It feels like it's waiting for something. And I'm terrified I might eventually find out what. The little wooden box. It started innocently enough. I found the little wooden box at a dusty flea market, tucked between chipped teacups and faded postcards. It was plain, dark wood, no carvings, no lock, just a simple, smooth cube maybe 4 inches across. Something about its unassuming nature pulled me in. It felt cool and solid in my hand. I bought it for a few dollars, thinking it would be a nice, unobtrusive place to keep stray buttons or loose change on my nightstand. I live alone. My apartment is small but usually feels safe, until the box arrived. The first morning after buying it, I noticed the lid was slightly ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it flush the night before. Shrugging it off, I pushed it shut and went to work. The next morning, the lid was open again. Inside, nestled on the bare wood bottom, was a single, tiny, dried wildflower, the same kind I'd idly picked from a crack in the sidewalk the previous afternoon and then forgotten about, letting it drop from my fingers a block later. My stomach did a slow, cold flip. How? It had to be a coincidence. Maybe a petal had stuck to my clothes. But this was a whole, perfectly preserved flower head. I threw it away, closed the box firmly, and tried not to think about it. But the next day, there was something else inside, a small, smooth, gray pebble, almost perfectly round. I remembered holding one just like it the day before, found while waiting for the bus, turning it over and over in my palm to soothe my nerves before a stressful meeting, then slipping it back into my coat pocket. I checked the pocket, it was empty. The air in my bedroom felt suddenly colder. I slammed the box shut, my hand trembling slightly. This wasn't coincidence. From then on, it was a daily occurrence. Every morning, the box contained a small token from the previous day, specifically from a moment I thought was private or insignificant. A shred of blue thread identical to one that snagged off my sweater unnoticed. A single, iridescent fish scale, likely from the brief moment I paused by the pet store window. A perfectly formed teardrop-shaped salt crystal the morning after I'd cried silently over a sad movie. These weren't just objects, they were echoes of my hidden moments, my fleeting thoughts, my unwitnessed anxieties. The box wasn't just storing things, it felt like it was collecting pieces of me. Fear began to curdle in my gut. I moved the box to the living room bookshelf. The next morning, it was back on my nightstand, lid slightly open, containing a tiny, tightly folded corner torn from a page of the book I'd been reading in bed. I tried locking it in a drawer. It reappeared on my desk. I tried hiding it in the back of my closet, under a pile of old sweaters. I found it sitting squarely on my pillow, lid invitingly open, holding a single, long strand of my own hair, tied in an impossibly intricate knot. My apartment stopped feeling safe. I felt constantly watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I started sleeping with the lights on. I jumped at every creak and groan of the building. I'd find myself staring at the box, expecting it to move, expecting something. Sometimes, late at night, I thought I heard the faintest scratching sound coming from inside it, like tiny claws on dry wood. I had to get rid of it. One Saturday, filled with a desperate surge of courage, I took the box outside. I walked blocks away to a public park trash can and buried it deep under sticky wrappers and coffee cups. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. I practically ran back to my apartment, locking the door behind me, my heart pounding with frantic hope. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in weeks. I woke up slowly, the room filled with pale morning light. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then, a cold dread seeped into my bones. I turned my head slowly towards the nightstand. The little wooden box was there. The lid was wide open,